I wasn't always the guy mopping up spilled soda at 2 in the morning while talking myself out of panic attacks. But life doesn't care about your plans, and neither do gas stations. My name's Caleb Mercer, 24 years old, 3 years into an engineering degree I was never sure I wanted. The day my dad had his stroke, I walked out of class, drove home, and didn't go back. 1 minute, you're scribbling equations on a whiteboard, and the next you're changing bed sheets in your childhood bedroom, while your old man slurs half-words at the ceiling fan. I tried to keep my head above water working part-time at a tire shop, but bills pile up fast when you've got student loans and no real plan. I took the Petromart job out of desperation. No background check, no interview, just a shrug from a guy named Casey and a key card. Petromart 24 sits at exit 89 off I-75, just outside Knoxville. 2 pumps, dusty security cameras, and a wall of off-brand energy drinks that'll kill you twice as fast as a real Red Bull. Nights were quiet, almost too quiet. That particular winter, the nights had teeth. Wind howled through the automatic doors if you didn't latch them right. By 1 a.m., even the truckers had moved on, and all that was left was buzzing fluorescents and the low, groaning hum of old freezer units. I'd been on shift since 10 p.m., wiped down the coffee machines, restocked the cigarettes, and just finished mopping up aisle 3 when the door chimed. In walked this man, maybe mid-30s, pale as drywall. He had those eyes, you know the kind. Empty, hollow, like he'd seen some real bad things and just never came back from them. He wore this faded red flannel stained at the cuffs, walked real slow like each footstep was a choice. I gave him the standard evening and a nod. He didn't respond, just started pacing through the store, not looking for anything in particular. Stood staring into the freezer for 5, maybe 6 minutes. I thought maybe he forgot why he came in, or maybe he was tweaking. When he came to the counter, he looked right at me, like just realized I existed, and said, "Thanks." Then he walked out. No purchase, no eye contact, no sense. Something in my stomach turned sideways. I pulled out my phone and texted my buddy Dylan. "Yo, creepy dude just came in." Said nothing. Eyes were dead. Walked out. I got a weird feeling. Dylan replied with a laughing emoji and a skull. That was the kind of friend he was. I chuckled too, but only for a second. At 2:14 a.m. on the dot, the bell chimed again. Same guy, same walk, but this time, his flannel was gone. He wore a black hoodie pulled low, face in shadows. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket. He didn't browse. He didn't speak. He just walked to the counter, slow and deliberate. I stepped back. My instincts screamed, "This ain't right." He stopped in front of me, reached into his hoodie, and pulled out a small silver pistol. Didn't point it. Didn't say, "Give me the money." He just laid it on the edge of the counter like it was a phone and said, calm as a Sunday sermon, "Can I get a pack of gum?" My mouth went dry. I scanned the gum. The beep felt like a gunshot. He dropped a few coins on the counter, nodded, took the gum, and walked out into the night. No robbery, no threat. Just a message. I locked the doors, flipped the deadbolt, something we technically weren't supposed to do. Then I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just staring at the door like it owed me an explanation. You ever feel like your body knows something your brain doesn't? That's how it was. My spine was tight like a coiled spring. Every time the wind hit the glass, I twitched. It wasn't fear exactly, it was worse. Uncertainty. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger just happened, and I was too slow to realize it. 15 minutes later, a county sheriff rolled up in a mud-splattered SUV. Deputy Sanders. Bald, heavy-set, good old boy type. I told him what happened, showed him the footage. He watched in silence, then rewound it. "You say he didn't demand anything?" he asked. "Nope, just bought gum." "You sure that's a real pistol?" "I mean, it looked real." He didn't point it, but it was there. I saw it clear. Sanders exhaled through his nose and rubbed his forehead. "Well, technically, he didn't commit a crime unless he threatened you or tried to rob the place. Could be an airsoft for all we know." I stared at him. So, what do I do? You stay alert, and maybe keep your phone nearby. Helpful. After he left, I tried calling Casey, my manager. Straight to voicemail. Texted her a long message explaining everything. She didn't respond until 8:45 the next morning. That guy's probably on something. Don't overthink it. You good? Yeah, totally. I muttered to myself. I'm great. That day, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faint smirk, that silver pistol, the dead calm in his voice. And what got me the most? He paid. Full price. Exact change. Like he wanted me to remember this wasn't about money. It was about control. Over the next few weeks, I kept telling myself it was a one-off, some junkie on a weird trip. But the problem with trauma is it teaches your body to react before your brain can talk it down. Every night shift, I watched the door like a hawk. I kept the baseball bat from the storage closet propped under the counter. I asked Casey if we could install another camera outside the entrance. She brushed it off, said we didn't have the budget. Typical. About 10 days later, around the same time, 2:12 a.m. maybe, this teenage kid comes in. Skinny, hoodie, couldn't be more than 17. I tensed up before he even got to the counter. He asked for a Sprite. I gave it to him with shaky hands. Everything okay, man? He asked. Yeah, I lied. Long night. When he left, I leaned over the counter and dry heaved. The real damage wasn't what happened. It was what could have happened. That space between what you know and what you fear. That's where paranoia grows like mold. I started carrying a pocket knife. I'd flick it open and closed under the counter like some nervous tick. The customers never noticed, but it gave me some illusion of power. Dylan told me I should quit. Petromart's not worth it. Dude, you've had nightmares for 2 weeks, just bounce. I can't, I said. My dad's meds, rent, everything. I need this job. I didn't say it out loud, but there was more. Part of me needed to prove I could handle it. Like if I bailed, it meant that guy won, that he took something I couldn't get back. One Friday, just after 2, I saw a man in a hoodie pacing outside near the dumpster. Couldn't see his face. I killed the lights in the front, grabbed the bat, and waited. He never came in. When I finally peeked out through the crack in the door, he was gone. It's been 5 months now. I still work the night shift, but I see things differently. I installed a new lock on the back exit myself. I keep the bat closer. The anxiety's still there, but it's not as sharp. Just a low hum in the background. What stuck with me more than the gun was the look in that man's eyes. He wanted me to know he could have taken something from me if he wanted to. My life, my peace, my sense of safety. But he didn't. And that kind of power? That's terrifying. Now when people come in around 2 a.m. asking for gum or soda, my fingers twitch. Not from fear anymore, just awareness. I'm still here, still watching the door, still hoping that chime never rings the same way again. Not all threats are loud. Some whisper their way into your life just to see how much fear they can leave behind. But survival isn't always about fighting. It's about learning, adapting, and refusing to give away your peace for free. If I'm being honest, I didn't move to California to chase a dream. I moved to get away from the quiet disappointment I left behind in Nebraska. A dead-end relationship, a string of forgettable jobs, and a family that stopped asking questions because they were tired of my non-answers. Cybersecurity seemed like something that sounded important, sharp, modern. I wanted to be someone who mattered. I applied to data core systems mostly because the listing said entry-level night shift analyst, and I figured no one else was fighting to work overnight in a tech park that went dark by 10 p.m. To my surprise, they hired me after one Zoom interview. 3 weeks later, I was living in a furnished studio in West Oakland, eating instant noodles and walking to work with pepper spray in my hand. The office was on the 15th floor of a mostly empty high-rise. It always smelled faintly of ozone and printer ink. Rows of cubicles, a couple server closets, an industrial kitchenette that looked like it hadn't seen a meal since 2015. I worked from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., mostly monitoring traffic logs, updating firewall alerts, and reading internal tickets that rarely needed more than a copy-paste answer. The job was dull, isolating, and surprisingly well paid. The only other night shifter was Adam, a 50-something guy with thick glasses, a goatee, and the voice of someone who had long since stopped caring about small talk. He worked until midnight, then left me alone to carry the graveyard. That night, Thursday, March 11, 2021, started like every other. Adam clocked out with his usual grumble, "Be safe, kid," before disappearing into the elevator. I barely looked up from my screen. Around 12:55 a.m., I stood up to stretch and walked to the kitchenette. I had a ritual: make a fresh cup of coffee, pace a few steps, check my reflection in the microwave door, and then force myself back to the console. But that night, when I reached for the coffee machine, something stopped me cold. It was unplugged, neatly, deliberately. The cord coiled behind it like it had never been touched. I froze. I had made coffee at 11 a.m. I remembered watching the pot fill. I remembered pouring it into my chipped ceramic mug from home. So why was the machine unplugged now? I plugged it back in, more annoyed than scared. Probably just a cleaner being tidy. But something about it nagged at me, like a rock in your shoe you can't find. I turned to walk back to my desk, and that's when I noticed my phone was gone. Not misplaced, gone. It was always to the right of my mouse pad, screen down, notifications silenced. I patted my jacket pockets, checked under the desk, scanned the console tray. Nothing. I tried not to panic. Maybe I'd left it in the bathroom. Maybe I set it on Adam's desk without thinking. But when I checked both places, I came up empty. Then I heard it, faint, echoing from the far end of the floor past the cubicles. My phone's alarm. Not the default tone, but my custom one, the one I set to keep me awake after midnight. A soft, pulsing chime like a heartbeat underwater. It was coming from behind the storage partitions. My breath caught in my throat. That was when my instincts kicked in, and I ran. I didn't stop to think. I didn't pause to ask myself if I was overreacting. I bolted down the hallway, past the kitchenette, straight to the stairwell. The door's crash bar clanged behind me like a shot. My sneakers slapped against the concrete steps as I descended, 15 floors nonstop. By floor 10, my lungs were screaming. By floor 5, my knees ached. But I didn't stop. At ground level, I shoved open the exit and ran across the street to the Chevron station. The guy behind the counter was leaning over his phone, startled when I burst through the doors, breathless and shaking. "I need to use your phone," I gasped. "Please." He handed it over without a word. I called 911, told them someone was in my office, told them I worked the night shift, told them I didn't know who he was, only that my phone was gone and the alarm was ringing from somewhere no one should have been. The dispatcher was calm. Too calm. I waited outside while 2 black and white cruisers pulled into the lot 10 minutes later. I pointed up to the 15th floor, still winded. The officers took the elevator. I stood under a flickering street lamp, staring up at the dark windows. My body wouldn't stop trembling. About 15 minutes later, one of the officers came back down. He looked serious, not panicked, but his expression told me enough. "We found your phone," he said. "Partitions near the server room." It was inside a cardboard box behind a row of storage. I nodded slowly, unsure whether I felt vindicated or nauseous. "There was a man hiding in the same corner," he added. "Former employee, name's Harold Brenner. He still had his old keycard. Said he was trying to get something back." I couldn't even speak. They arrested him on the spot. He hadn't taken anything else, just my phone, but he'd been there. Watching. Waiting. The next morning, HR sent a mass email. "As of today, all legacy access cards are revoked. Please see facilities to receive new ones. We take security seriously and are investigating the breach." That was it. No mention of me. No acknowledgement that a woman was followed, watched, and nearly trapped. I was offered paid time off. I took it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of long showers, daytime sleep, and anxiety spiraling into nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those partitions, heard the chime, woke up with my heart thudding like I'd run those stairs all over again. Adam called once, left a voicemail. "Hey, I heard what happened. Sorry. You want to talk? I'm around. Take care." I didn't call back. The worst part was how much of it I couldn't explain. Why me? I'd never met Harold, never emailed him. HR later confirmed he'd been fired 6 weeks before I started. The theory was that he'd come back for a company-issued laptop. But if that was true, why not take it during the day? Why hide? Why unplug the coffee machine? Why take my phone? The questions looped in my mind until they stopped mattering. When I finally returned, everything looked the same. Same desks, same blinking routers, same hum of the server fans. But it wasn't the same. I didn't stay late anymore. I never left my phone unattended. I checked the storage partitions every hour. I told myself I was stronger now, smarter, but I also knew what it meant to feel hunted, even if nothing ever physically touched me. Sometimes at night, when things got quiet, I'd hear phantom sounds, footsteps that weren't there, that custom alarm tone, faint as if coming from behind a wall. I deleted it from my phone, changed the tone, but it still rang in my head. Adam eventually retired. The night shift became mine alone. I stuck with it because I didn't want fear to be the reason I left. But I also knew I was changed. I kept the job, transferred to a new location after a year. I still work in cybersecurity, but I don't glamorize it anymore. It's not about glowing blue screens and hackers in hoodies. It's about being alert, especially when the world gets quiet. I upgraded my home security. I don't ignore gut feelings, and I never leave my phone behind. Sometimes I still dream of that night, of footsteps behind me, of silence where someone was breathing, of hearing my alarm echo from a place it didn't belong. People ask what scared me most. It wasn't the man. It was the idea that someone could decide to rewrite your night, your sense of safety, without ever saying a word. Trust your instincts, even when nothing seems wrong on the surface. Fear doesn't need permission to be valid, and sometimes the smallest signs are the loudest warnings. I never wanted to work in retail. Honestly, I didn't want to work at all. Not in the way you do when you're 20 and your body still feels half asleep from high school burnout. But life doesn't really care what you want when the heat in your trailer's barely running and your mom's crying quietly over diner tips that won't stretch far enough. When Greenland Value Mart called me for the night stalker position, I didn't even ask about the pay. Just nodded, filled out the forms, and showed up at 10 p.m. with duct-taped sneakers and an anxiety knot in my throat that hadn't left in 2 years. Night shift was simple. That's what I liked. Clock in, don't talk, stock shelves, stay out of the way. We had a crew of maybe 4 after midnight, but most stayed in their own corners of the store. The only one who talked much was Darla, 50-something, divorced twice, smokes menthols like it's her job, grumpy but decent. She called me kid and never expected small talk. That was enough for me. Aisle 12 became my zone pretty quickly. Cleaning supplies, pet litter, mops, paper towels. It was one of the least trafficked aisles, even for our mostly empty graveyard shift. I kept my earbuds in, lo-fi music playing low enough to still hear if someone called for help over the store intercom. I didn't mind the silence. I preferred it. But then, that Saturday happened. It was November. Cold enough outside that every time the automatic doors opened, a blast of icy air curled through the entrance. I was midway through shelving new boxes of microfiber cloths, those 3-packs wrapped in thin plastic, when I caught a flicker of motion at the far end of the aisle. A man, long brown coat, walking past. I paused, pulled an earbud halfway out. I hadn't heard the door chime, which always dinged when customers entered. No footsteps, no cart squeaks. I moved to the aisle edge and peeked toward the front registers. Nothing. The floor was empty. Just the dull, yellowish lights reflecting off the polished linoleum. I went back to stocking, trying not to overthink it. Maybe it was another employee. Maybe someone came in during Darla's smoke break. I told myself I was tired, that I'd imagined it. But then I noticed the shelf. 3 microfiber cloth packs, gone. I had just stocked them. And on the floor, one of the plastic wrappers, crushed like someone tore it open and dropped it. No noise, no footsteps, no security alerts, just silence. That was the first time my stomach started to feel heavy, like something was leaning against me that I couldn't see. Then the store speaker cracked on. Not music, not Darla's voice, just a flat, calm male voice. You missed a spot. Clean it up. I froze. I looked around like an idiot, like I thought I'd catch someone behind me holding a mic. Nothing. Just the low hum of refrigeration from frozen foods, aisles stretching out in sterile emptiness. I dropped the rest of the cloths into the cart and made my way toward the front of the store, fast walking. The silence didn't follow me. It was already there. I found Darla out back, leaning against the brick wall behind the loading dock, cigarette in hand, phone glowing in her other. "You good, kid?" she asked when she saw my face. I told her someone had been in the aisle, that I heard something on the speaker system. Her eyes narrowed. "No one's in the store, just us. I checked the counters before I clocked out for break. You didn't fall asleep on the mop bucket, did you?" I laughed. Kind of. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I heard. I went back inside and made my way to the monitor room, where the security feed looped through 12 low-res screens. I rewound the last 20 minutes. No man, no brown coat, nothing in aisle 12, except me. And then it happened. Frame 37, second 14. A flicker in the freezer glass behind me. A reflection, a face, pale, thin-lipped, grinning. But I was alone. The shelf behind me suddenly went from full to empty. No motion, just a flicker. I backed away from the monitor, and I didn't go back to aisle 12 for the rest of that night. I spent the next 3 hours slowly restocking frozen food. It kept me near the exit. I could see everything, no shelves blocking my view. I kept my earbuds out. At 3:03 a.m. I found something else. A note tucked between 2 bags of dog food, where nobody should have been. Folded, cream-colored, no Value Mart branding. Inside, handwritten in sharp black ink, "You're invisible. That's why I like you." Same style, same handwriting as the prank note found last week that Darla blamed on bored teens. But I knew better now. I crumpled it and tossed it in my locker. Then I took my break early and didn't leave the break room until the lights turned purple for morning cleanup. I never said anything else to Darla. I didn't know what to say. Monday came. I told myself Saturday was a bad night. Maybe my brain short-circuited from stress. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some weird burnout-fueled dream sequence. I'd read about that before. Night shift hallucinations, sleep deprivation illusions. People start hearing whispers or thinking lights flicker. But I wasn't tired. And I hadn't imagined that voice, or that face. Still, I showed up, stocked dry foods, kept near the cameras, pretended aisle 12 didn't exist. At 2:11 a.m. I had to go back. The pallet of disinfectants had been delivered late and Darla asked me to finish the row. I said sure, told myself I'd be fast. I wheeled the cart down the aisle. No one there, until I turned. Brown coat, at the far end, just for a second. He disappeared behind the break room door. I didn't move, I didn't blink. And then, crash. A shelf fell behind me. Cleaning sprays clattered to the floor. I jumped, turned. Nothing broken. Just a single wire shelf collapsed as if nudged by a foot. That was it. I clocked out early. Darla asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't. She looked at me like I was soft. I didn't care. I never went back to Value Mart after that. Darla called twice, left voicemails. I don't get it, Trevor. I thought you liked the quiet. I did. Until the quiet started looking back at me. I applied at a local shipping warehouse the next week. Day shifts only. Loud. Chaotic. I like that now. But sometimes, when I walk through any store, I avoid the cleaning aisles, especially if there's a brown coat on display, or silence that feels too aware. One night, I found something in my hoodie pocket, folded up. Another note. You see me now? That's enough. No idea how it got there. Maybe I imagined it. Or maybe once something knows your name, once it sees you when you thought no one else did, it doesn't forget. I still dream about aisle 12. In those dreams, I'm always stocking the same shelf. Microfiber cloths, always 3. And when I turn around, he's standing there. Not smiling, not threatening, just watching. Like he wants to remind me that I was seen. Because that's what got me, more than the voice or the notes or the reflection. It was the way the man in the coat paid attention to me. Like he knew I didn't matter to anyone else in that store. Like my invisibility made me visible to him. There's something chilling about being noticed. Not by someone who cares, but by something that exists. Only on warriors to haunt the forgotten. That store is still open, as far as I know. I drove past it once, late at night. Lights were on. Aisle 12 still had its signs up. I didn't stop. Some shelves aren't meant to be stocked twice. There's a strange comfort in being invisible, until the wrong thing decides to see you. Sometimes we convince ourselves that being unnoticed keeps us safe, that blending into the background protects us. But being unseen doesn't make you immune. It just makes you a better target for what's lurking in the silence. Don't let the world convince you that your presence doesn't matter, because someone or something might be watching, waiting, to remind you it does, even if it's the last thing you ever wanted. When I first took the early morning shift at Walmart's customer service counter, I sought calm above all else. The late afternoon hours had become too noisy. Kids crying, shoppers in a hurry, debates over expired coupons. But 5 a.m., 8 a.m. on Thursdays offered something different. Sparse aisles, minimal chatter, and returned items done politely and efficiently. It meant I could breathe between customers. Fresh from a divorce and scraping together savings, I needed peace. I lived alone in a rental behind the store's parking lot. My diet was steady, coffee and oatmeal in the morning, and I wore neutral clothes, navy, gray, beige, emotionally cautious. I never looked for conflict. Then he appeared. He came in exactly at 5:07 a.m. one Thursday, quiet, neutral clothes, neatly pressed khakis or trousers, clean-shaven. He didn't speak until I scanned his first return. A pack of socks. I don't remember there being any record of those socks being sold here, but the receipt looked fresh, almost suspiciously neat. I processed it anyway. He leaned in slightly as I handed him the refund. "You have a very steady voice," he said. "It's rare to find someone so gentle with process." I gave a polite nod, mumbling, "Thank you," and tried not to smile. Over the next few Thursdays, he returned something different each time. First a small screwdriver set, then a tea kettle, followed by a can of paint. All of it seemed random. None of the items seemed to match what Walmart typically sold, or what I'd seen on our shelves. The receipts were always perfect, crisp, no sign of wear, and I couldn't pull any matching record in the system if I tried. Still, I processed the transactions and he walked out calmly. By the 4th week, he brought in a full toolkit. "I've been fixing things," he said as I rang it up. There was a pause. "Working. But I'm not sure if it's..." I nodded again, took the kit and avoided eye contact as I refunded him. As he turned to leave, he added quietly over his shoulder, "I moved into your complex last weekend. Saw you at the mailboxes. You wear navy a lot." My heart froze. I'd worn a navy hoodie to get the mail, once. After dark. He knew. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the shift in my mind, the returns, the receipt anomalies, his closeness, that last sentence about the hoodie. On week 5, I half expected him, but he didn't show up. Part of me was relieved. Another part wondered if it was over. Then things changed. By week 6, my quiet mornings felt fraught. My porch light flickered inconsistently, only when I approached the door. One morning, I discovered a half-eaten granola bar on my dashboard. I never bought it. Another time, my front gate, the automatic latch, was unlatched when I woke. I lived in a small rental behind the parking lot. Nobody else came through that way. Nobody I knew. I told myself it was paranoia. I tried to breathe. Finally, I told my manager. He checked logs, found that there were no scanning entries for the returns, no matching transactions in any card system, no customer profile with his name. The cameras near my counter had malfunctioned frequently in early morning, recording gaps at exactly the time he'd appeared. I blurted it all out. He shrugged. Must be internal error or glitch. Just flag him if he shows again. I tried to absorb that, but I couldn't. Then, one morning before work, there was a shopping bag at my doorstep. Brown paper tied closed. Inside, the toolkit, the socks, the screwdriver set, even the can of paint, and a receipt, lightly printed, but with a handwritten note at the bottom. No refunds, but thank you for always being kind. I staggered back, shaking. I dropped the bag and went back inside without looking again. That was it. I couldn't go back. I texted my manager that same morning and didn't return to work. I packed my things, sublet the apartment, and left that area within a week. Still, at 5:07 a.m. on Thursdays, I wake up, with or without an alarm. I sit in the dark, heart pounding, waiting, listening. I moved into a new apartment several towns over. I switched jobs to something with simple human interaction. Early morning library assistant shifts, book stamps and friendly readers, no returns requiring scrutiny or oversight. Still early hours, but safer. The library cameras worked. The people looked me in the eye and introduced themselves. Still, the memory didn't fade. I pieced together more of the pattern. Receipts that never got scanned. Items that didn't match store inventory. Camera blind spots exactly at 5:07. Him leaning in close to me, recognizing my hoodie color. That final note and returned items on my doorstep, like he'd collected them, reversed the process, and left them. He never said thank you, but he left everything back. I told therapists about waking to 5:07 anxiety, about paranoia at my mailbox late at night. They said, "You trusted that small window of peace too long." Sometimes polite avoidance invites someone to step closer. Years later, I still wake at 5:07. Usually I stay in bed and wait for the moment to pass. Sometimes I pull on a sweater and walk outside, checking the porch, the gate. No one ever appears. I've grown less nervous with time. The library walls feel safe. Coworkers know my name. My mail doesn't get rearranged. But it still unsettles me that someone watched me that closely. That he gave back things I never gave under the pretense of polite returns, and referenced me in ways I barely exposed. That he lived nearby at my building's edge, in silence, and chose my voice to praise. I understand now how small details matter, how soft voices can lure someone in, how being polite can make you stand out to the wrong kind of attention. I learned that even unremarkable people in quiet shifts can become seen. Just enough. Being polite and steady isn't a shield. Sometimes caring, and being seen as kind, can draw attention from people who don't fit into normal systems. Trust the quiet, but honor your instincts. Your presence matters, even if no record exists, and your safety shouldn't depend on process or policy. If someone knows your routines better than you, that's a sign to speak up, even if it feels awkward or reserved. I never thought folding clothes would feel so safe. When I accepted the overnight floor associate job at Thompson Town Outlet in Iowa City, I pictured quiet racks, steady company hours, mindless folding. and peace after dropping out of grad school. I thought the dim lights and silence would help quiet the panic that followed me from my last relationship. I moved back in with my older brother, started work around 10 p.m., and for the first few nights, the routine was comforting. Folding children's jackets, restocking shelves, answering lost customer calls in hushed tones. My manager, Joe, stayed locked in his back office doing paperwork late, and the only other employee on the floor, Alicia, mostly turf-toed between her phone and the break room. By midnight, the store felt like a stage set for one person. Me. I didn't mind. I preferred not talking, eyes down, hands smoothing hangers. It was near 12:45 when I found myself refolding sweaters by the fitting rooms, an area with those flickering lights and weak security coverage never fixed. That's when I heard humming, a woman's voice, off-tune and faint. My chest clenched. No music played at that hour, and Alicia wasn't around. I paused, folded top still in my hand, and leaned toward the narrow fitting room corridor. Hello? I called, trying to keep the tone light, professional. They're closed for cleaning. Silence. No response. I noticed one fitting room door was ajar, just a sliver open. I'd locked them all personally earlier in the night. I checked the hallway. No sign of Alicia. The store registers up front were empty. Joe was silent behind closed doors. I knocked gently. "Ma'am?" No reply. I pushed slowly inside. Graffiti and dust flickered in the low light. The mirror had a dirty fingerprint streak across it, greasy and fresh. My reflection stared back cautiously before I turned quickly around. No woman, no blue dress, no shape in the corner, only my breath and the dull hum of overhead lights. My walkie crackled. I touched the button reflexively, and it crackled again. "She likes you." My blood froze. It wasn't Alicia's voice, it was soft, female but static-filled, distant, not the clipped manager tone I knew. "She likes when you fold things." I yanked off the walkie mic and bolted toward the break room, heart rattling. Inside, Alicia stared at her phone as if nothing had happened. I blurted, "You messing with the walkies?" Her eyebrows rose. "What? No. Haven't touched mine in an hour." Her voice was flat, serious, not teasing. I clutched my own walkie, off, batteries dead when I checked. I spent the next hour staying near the checkout tills, avoiding the back. The silence no longer comforted. Instead, it felt like waiting. At 2:14 a.m., Joe messaged me to investigate a noise complaint from the fitting room hallway. A loud thud heard over the security mic shortly after I encountered the door. I didn't want to go, but I did. The hallway was empty except for dust motes drifting in the harsh light. Then I saw it. On the floor in front of the mirror, a dress laid neatly, lace white, old-fashioned like something from a 1960s catalog, definitely not our stock. I knelt, written across the mirror in lip gloss, "Fold this next." I dropped my scanner and ran. Heart pounding. I didn't stop until I was behind the tills. I later told Joe there had been a break-in attempt near the fitting rooms. Security footage confirmed the hallway was a dead zone that night. No video, no mic pickup. He nodded and told me not to worry, but when I looked at him, I saw his jaw tense and eyes distant, as if he knew something unsaid. I gave 2 weeks' notice the next morning. I couldn't stay. I left that shift, never switching on the walkie again. Later that day, I got one last message through my powered-off device. "She liked how quiet you were." I moved in with my brother after quitting. I found a day job at a local cafe, shoulder to shoulder with laughter and the clink of dishes. No silent corridors, no whispering voices. But nights after the shift, sometimes I'd wake in darkness hearing a murmur, a hum so faint it could have been my own breath echoing in the quiet. I replayed what happened in my head. The fingerprint, the walkie voice, the lace dress on the floor, the mirroring message, maybe cosmetic prank gone wrong, but none of it fit any prank I'd ever known. Nobody tampered with fitting rooms, and nobody had left that glove-fitted note in lip gloss except someone who watched, and aware. Despite evidence or lack thereof, I found myself drawn back there. I drove past the store once at 1 a.m., windows dark. I didn't go in. I couldn't face flickering lights or that dress. Some nights I thought, maybe I overreacted. Maybe it was sleep deprivation, but my nerves never settled. My brother said I looked haunted. I told him I was just tired. He nodded, but I saw the fear in his eyes when I recounted the walkie voice and the pranks. Still, I kept that walkie powered off, left it in a drawer. Yet, 2 weeks later, I found another note folded in my coat pocket. No branding, no postcard design, just cream cardstock, sharp script. She saw you fold today. I stared at it, breath caught. I hadn't worn that coat in a week. No delivery, no mail, no one had visited. My hands shook yet again. I realized this wasn't random, it was deliberate. So I changed the locks on my bedroom door. I stopped wearing skinny coats to work. I double-checked fitting room doors manually. I told my cafe manager about anxiety. I still needed help building things up, not crashing under dread. Therapy sessions started again. Less nights alone. At home, I tossed the notes in the trash. But each time I walked past the bin, I paused. Curious if the next one would appear, knowing that once something notices you, it doesn't just vanish. Over the next few months, I was fine, until I wasn't. Anxiety returned stronger than before. Not about the stalker or the store, but about being quiet, being invisible. I found myself scrolling social media late at night, trying to see what loops I'd slipped into. I'd wake sweating, haunted by the lip-glossed message, "Fold this next." One weekend evening, I drove by Thompson Town Outlet again. Automatic doors glowed inside, dawn shift already stocking racks. I slowed down near the entrance and saw someone inside. No shape, not even motion, just the racks, the same flickering lights in the fitting area. My throat constricted. I sped away, heart pounding. I called Alicia once, left a message. "You never saw anything?" She texted back hours later. "I don't know what happened. I heard things on the walkies after you left. I never turned mine on." I didn't call again. Some nights I dream. I'm folding sweaters in aisle 5, leaning into the racks. Mirror light flickers. Fitting room door creaks open. The lace dress appears. A whisper. "You're quiet." I wake before I can move. I realized I'd internalized the eerie lesson. It wasn't the store or the dress that got me, it was the silence, which was never silent. And the woman, whoever she was, liked that I kept quiet. Months passed. Life drifted back to normal. I got a promotion at the cafe, moved into my own place, started taking evening classes. I never intended to return to midnight shifts. Then one afternoon, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid, fitting room door in the background. In the foreground, my hands folding a sweater. I recognized the sleeve of a uniform I no longer owned. The image was grainy, timestamp stamped Mar 08-22-01-10 a.m. Exactly the night I heard the off-tune humming. My blood froze. My fingers shook. I didn't want to know who sent it. I shredded it immediately. Still, I couldn't sleep that night. The past caught me again. I thought of that woman, humming softly in a dead zone of camera coverage, leaving a dress for me to fold. It wasn't a ghost story. It was something else. Something real enough to leave evidence. Private enough to stay unseen by everyone else. I told a therapist about the photo, about being seen when I thought I'd hidden myself. She said, "Invisible people usually stay quiet about being hurt or overlooked. You got noticed, and not in a good way." I nodded. It felt right. Now, years later, I tell this story in part because I believe being unseen in a world that demands noise can feel safe. But sometimes it's dangerous. I'm no longer that quiet kid folding clothes in a dark store, waiting for something that came through silence. I talk in therapy. I talk to friends. I'm loud sometimes. But I still hear humming. Not nightly, but in quiet moments. A draft of memory. And I still avoid fitting rooms in dead zones. I see dresses in thrift racks and feel a shiver like someone once left it for me. The physical things are gone, but the lesson remains. Being invisible may feel safe, but silence can attract the wrong attention. Sometimes when we disappear into the background to protect ourselves, it's not protection, it's invitation. Speak up, move through shadows. Let someone else notice you first. Because being seen is not always harmless, but not always haunting. Sometimes it's what saves you. Long before the elevators at Vanguard Heights started moving on their own, I was already used to things that didn't make sense. I was 31 when I started working nights at that glass and steel tower on Lakeshore Drive. Vanguard Heights was the kind of place where rich people rented places to store their dogs. Penthouse floors, rooftop pools, marble everything. And they paid me to make sure nobody disturbed the peace after dark. Honestly, that suited me fine. My name's Marcus Lyle. I used to be a Marine. 2 tours overseas. Came back a different person, as they say. Loud noises made me twitch, and crowds made my stomach turn. My ex-wife tried to be patient at first, but you can't ask someone to love a ghost. I lost her and my daughter in the same year. That's when I started picking up overnight security jobs. Nights were quieter. No conversations I didn't want to have. No eyes to judge me. Just me and the silence. If you're broken enough, silence feels like a gift. The Vanguard's night shift ran from 11:30 p.m. to 7 in the morning. My job was simple. Hourly rounds through all floors, check the server room, manually upload backup CCTV footage from the floor ports, and monitor the elevators. There were 25 floors in total. The penthouse on the 25th was still under construction when I started. Nobody lived there. Just a bunch of tarp and scaffolding left behind when funding dried up. It was on my 3rd night, right around 12:46 a.m., when things started to go off script. I had just finished my walkthrough on the 24th and was about to take the stairs down. Never trusted elevators unless I had to. But as I passed by, I heard the chime. A soft ding. The elevator doors opened without me pressing anything, and when I glanced inside, the floor indicator wasn't blank like usual. It said 26. I stood there, blinking at the number. There was no 26th floor. I stepped back, staring at the display like it might fix itself. I even opened my notes app and checked my own log from earlier that week. Vanguard Heights was built in 2009, 25 floors total, with the penthouse being the top level. The elevator stayed open for a beat longer than usual, then shut quietly. The screen above it still read, "Going up." And sure enough, on the monitor back in the lobby, I watched it climb. 25. Then 26. And then it stopped. I remember holding my breath. I didn't tell anyone the next morning. I wasn't sure what to say. How do you bring up something like that? It's one thing to think you're cracking under pressure, another to confirm it out loud. I convinced myself it was a glitch. One of those elevator errors. I even Googled it. Phantom floors, I read. Programming bugs. Harmless stuff. I figured I'd let it go. Maybe it was just the building messing with me the same way my mind sometimes did. But a week later, same time, same elevator, it happened again. Only this time it came back down. And when the doors opened in the lobby, it was empty. Except for one thing. A set of small, wet footprints. Like a child's. Leading out of the elevator and vanishing halfway across the marble floor. I didn't report it. Hell, I didn't even mop it up. I just sat at the monitor desk for the next 5 hours, staring at that elevator, waiting for something, or someone, to come back. But nothing ever did. I started to dread 12:46. I'd stare at the clock every night, like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. Some nights the elevator stayed still. Some nights I heard that soft ding. The strange part was it only ever happened when I was alone. No residents, no cleaners, no witnesses. I tried to forget it. I really did. But then the tapes started changing. See, every night I'd walk each floor, then plug a handheld drive into the server ports on each one to back up footage. It was analog tech, more secure that way. Less chance of hacking, they said. I was reviewing footage from the 25th floor, the supposedly empty one, and I saw something impossible. It was me. I was standing outside the elevator, pressing the button. The problem was, I hadn't. I never used that elevator during my rounds, always the stairs. And in that footage, I looked different, not physically, but off. My posture was stiff. I wasn't blinking, just standing there, waiting. Then I saw the elevator arrive. Doors slid open, my figure stepped in, and then the screen glitched out, full static. When the feed returned, I was gone. I tried rewinding it 3 times. The same thing happened every time. I brought it up with Maria, my supervisor. She gave me the look people always do when you're a vet talking about strange things, like they're not sure whether to listen or call someone. "You're probably exhausted, Marcus," she said. "Get some rest. I can cover your next shift if you need sleep." I nodded, but I didn't take her up on it. Sleep didn't help anymore. Nightmares don't care how tired you are. I kept the footage, made a copy on my own drive, even uploaded it to a private folder online. Something about it felt wrong, like I needed proof in case I didn't make it through the week. Then came the footprints. They started showing up more often, sometimes fresh, sometimes smudged. Once I found a single handprint pressed against the inside of the elevator glass. Tiny, like a child's. One night I left my phone inside the elevator and pressed 24, just to see what would happen. The doors closed, and when I opened the panel to hit the emergency stop, the buttons had changed. There was no 24, only 26. That's when I knew I had to go up. Not just out of curiosity, but because whatever this was, it wasn't stopping. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't living. I was just existing between elevator chimes. So I made the decision. One last shift. I was going to press the button. That night I showed up at 10:45, brought a thermos of black coffee, a flashlight, my old marine knife. Dumb, I know. But muscle memory dies hard. At 12:45 I stood in front of the elevator and waited. It came on cue. Ding. The doors opened. Inside, the panel was lit. 26 gleamed like it had always been there. I stepped inside and pressed it. There was no jolt, no shudder, just a smooth, slow ascent. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink. The number changed. 24, 25, then 26. The doors slid open. What I saw didn't belong in this building. The hallway was narrow, lit by orange fluorescence that flickered overhead. The walls were exposed brick, unfinished and filthy. Wires hung from the ceiling like veins. The air was thick with dust. My boots left prints in it. There were no apartment doors, just wide, empty archways that led into pitch black. And then I heard it, a little girl's voice, singing, soft, off-key, ring around the rosy pocket full of... The sound was close, but I couldn't tell from where. Then came the dragging sound. Slow, wet, heavy. I turned and hit the elevator button. Nothing happened. When I spun around again, the elevator was gone. Just a gaping black shaft. Panic settled in fast. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and swept it side to side. Dust floated through the beam like snow. I called out, "Is someone there?" No answer. Then, whispering. Not a voice. Multiple. Some low, some high, all out of sync. I couldn't tell what they were saying. My feet moved without me telling them to, slow steps deeper into the corridor. The further I walked, the colder it got. Eventually, I found a janitor's closet, or what looked like one. I stepped inside and found a full-length mirror leaning against the wall. When I looked into it, I wasn't there. Instead, behind me stood a tall man in a black coat, pale face, thin smile. I turned around instantly. Nothing. But I swear, I felt breath on my neck. That was enough. I ran. My boots slammed against the concrete. I didn't care where I went, I just needed to find the elevator again. I don't know how long I ran. Time felt broken up there, but eventually, I turned a corner, and the elevator was waiting. Doors open. I didn't stop to question it. I dove in and slammed the L button. As it descended, I caught a glimpse of myself in the panel's reflection, and behind me, the man in the coat, smiling. I quit the next morning, left a note, didn't say goodbye to anyone. 3 months passed. I tried to rebuild what I could, started therapy again, stopped drinking, took a day shift at a warehouse, tried to forget it, but I still dream of the orange lights. One cold February afternoon, I walked past Vanguard Heights. There was a new banner on the scaffolding. Now leasing floor 26, the exclusive Sky Lounge experience. I walked into the leasing office, asked casually about the top floor. "Oh, we don't have a 26th floor, sir," the woman smiled. "Penthouse is the top." I pointed at the banner. Her smile didn't even flicker. "That's just a marketing term, for the views." I asked to see the floor plan. She pulled one from a drawer. 25 floors. I left, but I never got an answer. Just like I never got my reflection back from that mirror. I don't take elevators anymore, and I don't work nights. Some places weren't built for people like me. Some floors weren't built for anyone. Don't ignore the signs your mind or the world gives you. Whether it's trauma, instinct, or a door that shouldn't exist, some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some places remember you, even if you try to forget them. There's a kind of silence in empty office buildings that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels forgotten. Like you're walking through something that used to be alive, but isn't anymore. That's what the Delta Crown Tower felt like. 40 stories of glass, steel, and numbers, sitting dark in downtown Seattle after hours. At night it hummed low, like a machine that wasn't entirely shut off. I was one of the few people still walking its halls while the rest of the city slept. My name is Carla Dean. I was 28 when this happened. A janitor, single mom, and desperate. I didn't grow up thinking I'd spend nights wiping the fingerprints of people who wouldn't even nod at me in daylight. But when your son's life depends on medication insurance barely touches, you stop caring about pride. Mason, my boy, had a congenital heart defect. Treatments weren't just expensive, they were constant. Doctors, pills, monitors. It never ended. And when my husband bailed 6 months into the pandemic saying he couldn't take the pressure, I didn't have the luxury of a breakdown. So I took triple shifts. Delta Crown was my overnight job. I worked floors 12 through 16. Most nights I was alone except for a bored security guy on the first floor who rarely looked up from his tablet. I preferred it that way. But the 15th floor, something was wrong there from the start. It had been under renovation. Old finance offices gutted and sealed off. My manager told me to skip it entirely. "Nobody goes up there, Carla. Don't waste your time." He said it like it was an inconvenience, like warning me about wet paint. But every night at 1 a.m. I'd hear it. A soft knock from inside the fire escape door on 15. Always the same rhythm. Not loud, but deliberate. At first I thought maybe it was pipes or temperature shifts messing with metal. Buildings talk like that when they're old. But this wasn't a random creak. It was more like someone trying to be let in. I told myself not to overthink it. I had enough stress to carry. But my brain's never been great at letting things go once it gets its claws in. The 4th night I saw her. I was vacuuming the corridor on 16, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A woman walking past the break room windows. Pale skin, blondish hair in a bun, navy skirt, shoulder pads, like she stepped out of a 90s HR video. She turned, glanced at me, then disappeared around the corner near the old accounting wing. I followed her. There was no reason to. Just instinct. Maybe she dropped a key card. Maybe she was a night intern. But when I turned the corner, nothing. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no movement. Just that same dry, dusty floor that hadn't been cleaned since renovation started. I checked the emergency exit. Still chained shut. The bar still rusted. I reported it to my supervisor the next morning. Benny barely looked up from his tablet. You probably imagined it. Nobody's authorized up there after 10 p.m. Maybe you're just tired. Tired? Sure. I'd been tired since 2017, but I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, and something told me I hadn't seen the last of her. I started watching the clocks more closely. 1 a.m. came like clockwork. So did the knock. Not every night, but enough to keep me guessing. When I did hear it, I'd pause my mopping and just stand there, listening. The knocks would stop the second I moved toward the door. That's when the air changed. Colder, like a freezer door cracked open behind me. A week after the first sighting, I saw her again. She was standing at the far end of the 16th floor hallway. Same outfit, same expression, just still. Her hands were clasped together like she was waiting in line for something. I blinked. She was gone. I wasn't scared, not yet. I think part of me was just too exhausted to feel fear the way most people do. It was more of a dull, growing discomfort, like I'd stepped into someone else's memory. But that's when I started digging. The building had old workstations scattered throughout. Some terminals were still logged in from day staff. I used one on the 14th floor, figured I'd search the employee database, just to see if she showed up. All I had was a blurry memory. Pale, blonde, looked maybe mid-20s. I remembered 3 letters from the badge, RA, or maybe RD. I searched for an hour, nothing matched. Then I found an archive directory. Buried under former personnel files, I found her. Laura Girard, junior auditor, died 2004. I clicked the entry. 1 line. Fatal fall, fire escape shaft. On site. There was no follow-up report, no memorial, no HR notes, just gone. I kept digging. News articles, forums. I found a mention in a city record. Wrongful death claim filed by a father, settled privately. No details. But there it was. Her story had been erased from the building. But the building hadn't forgotten her. The 15th floor was where she fell. The fire escape door was where it happened. And suddenly everything made a different kind of sense. I brought a recorder the next night. A cheap voice memo device I used to use when studying. I clipped it to my belt and turned it on right before 1 a.m. The knock came, right on schedule. I approached the fire escape door slowly, mop in one hand, heart doing strange things in my chest. Once, twice. Silence. I know your name, I said softly. That was when the handle clicked. The door opened. Inside was a staircase, narrow and steep, wrapped in metal railings. The lights overhead flickered, barely functional. I stepped inside. The cold hit me like a slap. It wasn't just chill. It was wrong, like it didn't belong in the world I came from. The door slammed shut behind me. I screamed. The sound bounced off the walls and came back louder. My phone flashlight was shaking in my hands, then she appeared 4 steps above me. Lara. No blood, no wounds. But the way she stood, stiff, off balance, made something in my brain scream to run. Why won't they let me clock out? She whispered. I couldn't answer. I couldn't think. I turned and bolted down the stairs. My boots hit metal, then concrete, then linoleum. I pushed open the next emergency door, floor 14. I collapsed in the hallway, sobbing. Behind me, I heard it. Nails, scraping along cement, then silence. They found me an hour later in the lobby. Security said I must have tripped and hit my head. There were scratches down both arms, some bleeding. They called an ambulance, but I refused it. I didn't want to answer questions I knew no one would believe. Benny met me outside. What the hell happened? He asked. You have a ghost on the 15th floor, I said. I smiled when I said it. It felt stupid. but I wasn't kidding. He didn't laugh. "You've been working a lot of hours. Maybe take a few nights off." I didn't go back. The voice recorder was gone. I had it when I went in. It wasn't there when I left. 2 months later, I saw the building in the news. New ownership. Same structure. New name. Gerard Plaza. There was no explanation in the article. Just a mention of rebranding efforts. I don't know if they know why they chose the name. Maybe someone in legal saw it in a settlement file. Or maybe Lara got tired of being forgotten. Maybe this was her way of punching back through the walls. I still work nights. Different place now. Grocery store in Linwood. Quiet fluorescent lights. No more elevators. It pays less, but I sleep better. Mason's doing okay. He's 7 now. Loves dinosaurs. Thinks ketchup is a vegetable. He doesn't remember the months I spent in silence. But I do. Some nights, when I close up, I'll glance at the back doors and wonder what I'd do if I heard a knock. I don't know if I'd open it, but I'd probably listen. That's what Lara wanted, I think. To be seen. To be counted. All she asked was to clock out. But in places like Delta Crown, people become numbers. And sometimes numbers get lost. Systems fail, terminals crash, files corrupt. But ghosts, they remember, and they wait. No system is perfect. When institutions forget they're dead, they create holes in reality that can't be patched with money or silence. Everyone deserves to be seen and to go home. I didn't come to Oregon for peace, I came to disappear. By the time I stepped off that Greyhound in Portland, I'd changed my name, burned every bridge back home, and carried only what I could fit in a duffel. I was 26 and already on my 3rd life. The kind of guy who packed quietly, left at night, and didn't tell anyone. Not because I was running from the law, but from someone who was above it. Silverline Distribution hired me, no questions asked. Graveyard shift. Inventory coordinator. The title sounded better than it was, and really, I checked boxes, signed manifests, and moved pallets. But it was steady. And the night shift? That was perfect. Fewer eyes, fewer questions, no past. Our crew was small. 6 of us spread across a warehouse the size of a football field. It always smelled like rubber, coffee, and dust. You got used to it. The lights buzzed overhead and flickered whenever the system rebooted. That happened more than it should have. Bay 12 was the far end of the facility. Older, barely used, full of rusting shelving and equipment nobody wanted to touch. Overflow storage, they called it. I liked working near it. No cameras, no radios. Just me, the pallets, and the hum of the building settling. Some of the guys told stories about that bay. Accidents, weird sightings, missing time. I figured they were just screwing with the new guy. I didn't care. I'd lived through worse than ghost stories. Until April 3rd, 2:17 in the morning. I was doing rounds, clipboard in hand, when I passed by Bay 12. The lights above it flickered like they always did. I glanced through the mesh security gate. A man stood there, tall, stocky, reflective vest hanging crooked, torn and dirty. He was turned away, staring down the aisle like he was checking stock. "Hey," I called. "You lost?" No answer, no movement. I blinked. He was gone. I walked over, opened the gate, stepped inside. Nothing. Just dust and crates. I figured maybe it was a trick of the light. My eyes played games when I was tired. Still, I couldn't shake it. The next morning, I used Kenny's login to check the security footage. Kenny didn't care. He'd been there 6 years and stopped giving a damn 5 years ago. Bay 12's feed? Black from 2:16 to 2:20 a.m. No error code, just static. And that was just the beginning. The man kept showing up. Every night after that, always at 2:17 a.m., always in Bay 12. Sometimes standing, sometimes crouched. Never facing me. Never moving. I stopped checking the footage. There was no point. Same glitch, same blackout. 4 minutes wiped clean like they never existed. I told Kenny on a smoke break. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. That was the first time I saw him rattled. "You said reflective vest, right? Torn, dirt on the boots?" "Yeah," I said. "Tall guy, didn't see his face. You know him?" Kenny exhaled slowly. "White stone corp." "Tommy Beck, used to be floor manager. Back when we were still under..." "What happened?" "Forklift accident in under 9, Bay 12, during a grave shift reorg. Everyone swore he was walking between lanes, but the cameras glitched and the logs got corrupted. Forklift backed in, no one saw him, crushed instantly, no recovery, nothing left but a shoe and half a badge." "You serious?" "Insurance settled fast. His family comes by sometimes, leaves flowers in the alley behind the unit." "So, you think that's who I saw?" Kenny didn't answer. He just looked at the ground. "You ever seen him?" "I don't go near Bay 12 after 2 a.m., he muttered. I laughed, sort of, but it didn't feel funny. I decided to go in. Part of me was curious, part of me was stupid, but mostly I just wanted to know if I was losing my mind. Trauma does weird things to the brain. I'd seen people where there were none before, so I came prepared. Flashlight, phone camera, voice recorder app running. I entered Bay 12 just before 2:17 a.m. The air felt heavier, like I'd stepped into a sealed room. Lights flickered once, then shut off. Total black. I froze. Then I heard it, dragging. Not steps, not even walking, like something heavy, maybe metal, being pulled across the floor. Then, breathing, ragged, uneven, right behind me. I spun around, flashlight on. Nothing. My phone screen flickered. The recording had stopped. The screen turned green, then red, then black, a loud pop. Then the lights blinked back on, one by one, and there he was, at the end of the aisle, facing me. The vest was soaked through. His ID badge swung gently from his chest. Tommy Beck, shift supervisor. Night. Half his skull was caved in, one eye missing. The other stared straight through me. Then he opened his mouth. "Finish my shift." I ran. I don't remember how I got out of Bay 12. I remember pushing the gate open, slamming through the hallway, and hitting the cold cement of Bay 11. My chest hurt. My legs weren't working right. I screamed for help. The others found me crouched behind a compressor, shaking. "What the hell happened?" Kenny asked. I couldn't speak. He looked at me for a long time, then he whispered, "He talked to you, didn't he?" That was it for me. I sent my resignation 2 days later. No explanation. No return address. The warehouse didn't reach out. They never do. But 3 weeks later, I saw a photo on someone's social media. Silverline had mounted a small memorial plaque in the break room for Tommy Beck. No ceremony, no flowers. Just a black and white photo under glass with words burned into a brass plate. Shift never ended. Rest now. I work at a diner now. Day shifts. Nothing heavy. Nothing dark. I don't talk about what happened. Not to my coworkers. Not to my new landlord. Not even to myself most days. But sometimes around 2:17 a.m., when I wake up to use the bathroom or the wind hits the window just right, I remember the dragging sound. I remember the eyes. And I wonder how many other warehouses have ghosts no one talks about. Men who worked themselves to death, disappeared into shift schedules, and were replaced by the next body in line. We don't talk about the ones who were never clocked out. We just finish their shifts. Because the work has to keep moving. The system demands it. Even if the system forgets them, they don't forget us. When labor becomes invisible, so do the people behind it. Some jobs take everything from you, even your name, your rest, your death. Always remember, not every worker who disappears was truly lost. Some were simply overwritten. I never imagined I'd be back at Whisperhaven, sweeping its floors under fluorescent lights I'd once hated. My name's Elliot Granger, and I used to be a veterinary technician, bright-eyed, full of purpose. That changed in 2004, when I made a sedation mistake. A dog didn't wake up. I resigned quietly. Wrong word pouring in my mind. Remorse imprinted in every cell. Over time, alcohol and prescription drugs filled the silence I left behind. Recovery was slow. I lost my veterinary license, lost my marriage, but I kept surviving. By 2010, I was broke, divorced, and floundering. One winter evening, I answered a voicemail from Whisper Haven offering janitorial night shifts. It was the only steady work I could get. At first I refused. Pride, shame, all that nonsense. But then I moved in with my sister and recognized my desperation. I walked back through the shelter doors I'd once used as a tech, safe in my illusions. I didn't belong here anymore. Now I was just the guy cleaning kennels. The building falls into emptiness by 11 p.m. I mop suites, empty trash bins, refill medical cabinets. It keeps me busy and sober. But the hardest part of the job is the freezer room. Tucked past the medical wing, it stores remains of euthanized animals, bagged and tagged. The door groans on opening. Cold air sighs into the hallway. I avoid it when I can. That Sunday night in October, I'd been working since 10. The cats in cages stirred when I passed, sometimes making me pause. They felt haunted, I thought. Or maybe I was seeing ghosts. I wrung out my mop in the hall and heard a knock, loud on the front glass. I looked up. It was 2:47 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. A woman stood outside, hoodie drawn tight, face pale under the vestibule light. She looked exhausted, tears glistening. Beneath her messenger bag, she pressed her hand against the glass. "Please," she whispered. "I need him back." Over the past months, I learned not to open after hours. But something about her eyes, so raw, made me hesitate. I unlocked the vestibule and cracked the door. "Ma'am," I said gently, "I'm sorry. Post hours. You can't be here." "She's telling me he's still here," she said, voice trembling. "Noon, but I changed my mind. I need to hold him." They said he was euthanized, and I inhaled sharply. That guilt memory, my own, hit like a shockwave. Families doing this all the time. Regret flooding back. Against policy, against my better judgment. I stepped aside and unlocked the corridor to the freezer. Her lips trembled. "He's not garbage. I shouldn't have signed." I nodded, silent. Every fiber of my body screamed to stop, but I opened the freezer door. Inside, freezing air and stacked black bags. I found the tag. Butter, 10-year-old short hair. Euthanized today. I dragged the bag onto the prep table and unzipped halfway. The woman's gaze hardened. I asked softly, "Would you like a moment?" She nodded. I stepped outside and closed the door. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then I knocked. The table was empty. The bag zipped back up. No woman. No sign. The door alarm hadn't sounded. No footprints in dust. She vanished. I checked the vestibule, the washroom, the hall. No sign she'd left. The big glass door still reflected empty neon. My hands shook. I went back into the freezer room. Now the bag tag had changed. It read a different name, wrong. And the zipper was half open, as if someone else had handled it. The cold felt personal. A violation. I gulped air I didn't need. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed. The cats in cages screamed in my mind. I backed out and locked the door, then called my supervisor, voice tight. They said the cameras were offline due to maintenance. They'd review footage next day. HR gave me time off if I needed it. I said yes without thinking. Left quietly. I drove aimless, hail-covered desert roads at 3 a.m. Nothing else made sense. That night I slept maybe an hour. Dreamed of cats in mashed boots, voices whispers from empty halls. Next morning I found the freezer cage shifted. I removed Butter's bag and quietly repacked it correctly. Something in me couldn't leave it wrong. No one else would know. No one else saw. I stayed away for a few days. Ate ramen, stared at silence, called my sponsor, talked until I cried. Every time I remembered that knock at 2:47 a.m., I thought I saw that woman's face in my dreams. Then I went back. The building smelled like bleach and guilt. Everything looked the same. Except me. I avoided the freezer. I didn't want to touch that door again. I dipped a rag and wiped walls with shaking fingers. I began noticing weird things. Bin lids flopped open. Lights clicked on when nothing moved. A meow when all animals slept. My vision jittered at the doorway to the freezer, but I forced myself to walk past. I snapped at coworkers when they joked. I kept my mouth shut to ghost stories, but my heart thudded with something real. One night, a new volunteer, teenager, asked questions about hours. He lingered near the freezer door. I smiled stiffly. He backed away. Another time I was cleaning near the kennel next to medical wing and saw tracks in the dust. Footprints leading away from the freezer, no entrance logs. I angsted the security sheets. No record. Each time I reopened that door, guilt closed tighter around me. A month later, I just walked out during shift without notice. No apology, no letter, nothing. I drove off without turning back. That night, I packed a duffel in my junker sedan and left Flagstaff at dawn. Months later, I heard Whisper Haven updated cameras and upgraded freezer alarms. I read the HR newsletter. They issued after-hours protocols. I felt relief but also regret. I never told them what happened. I still dream of her voice. He's not garbage, I want him back. And when I listen, I hear my own guilt echoed back. I rebuilt with what I had. Went to counseling. Found a support group. Did janitorial jobs during the day. Volunteer shifts at animal rescues. But never near euthanasia. I still haunt the sound of a freezer door groaning. I still wake at 2:47 a.m. I never confirmed if she was real. Maybe hallucination. Maybe memory fractured by guilt and sleepless nights. Doesn't matter. She felt real enough. Touched guilt enough to twist tags, shift bags. Every day I live with that story inside, trying to be better than I was. Trying to help animals so I don't feel complicit. Trying to hold space for things I once harmed. Sometimes the hardest guilt isn't about what you did. It's about how you lived afterward. Our past mistakes don't define us, but refusing to face them locks us in. Compassion for others, and forgiveness for yourself, breaks open the coldest rooms. Long before I ever stepped foot in room 509, I believed hospitals weren't as scary as people said they were. It's not that I didn't understand why others felt that way. Most people only see a hospital when they're hurting, or worse, saying goodbye. But for me, it was routine. Clean white floors, latex gloves, caffeine at 2 a.m., and that faint metallic scent of antiseptic that somehow stays in your clothes. I was 29 when I transferred to St. Ridge Memorial, taking night shifts in the cardiology ward. 2 months into the job, fresh off a messy divorce and still nursing grief from losing my younger brother to a heart condition. Grief and exhaustion have a way of thinning your skin. You stop noticing it's happening, and by the time you do, it's already gotten inside you. St. Ridge was an older hospital, tucked in a forgotten corner of Baltimore. Red brick walls outside, fluorescent lights buzzing softly inside. Nothing unusual. The cardiology wing where I was assigned was a straight stretch of hallway with 12 rooms. Room 509 was at the end, tucked around a slight bend near the service elevator. That room was quiet, always a bit colder than the rest. On my first night, the nurse finishing her shift gave me a sideways glance when I asked if it was occupied. "Mr. Lane," she said, 71, mild cardiac arrest. Wife's a bit intense. She didn't explain further. When I met Herman Lane, he was sleeping, gray stubble on his cheeks, oxygen hissing beside him. His vitals were stable. Sitting by his bedside was his wife, Violet. She stood when I entered, as if ready to greet someone far more important than a night nurse. Her cardigan was beige, pressed neatly. Her hair was curled into tight, dated waves. She smiled, but it was her eyes that made me stop short, wide, watching, calculating. "Thank you for looking after him," she said. "He gets scared when I'm not nearby." She stayed all night sitting motionless. Didn't read, didn't nap, just watched him. In the weeks that followed, I only saw her once or twice, always the same outfit, same hollow smile. I wrote it off as old-fashioned devotion, like some people in my grandparents' church, but something about her felt staged, like she was performing for someone else in the room. Still, there were more pressing matters: codes, medications, IVs, families crying in quiet corners. It wasn't until a Tuesday night in January that I felt something shift. It was 1:10 a.m. I remember because the hallway clock had just ticked past the hour and the ward was unusually still. I was making rounds. I passed by room 509 and immediately noticed the change. The chair beside the bed was empty. No Violet. I checked the monitor. Mr. Lane was asleep. Oxygen steady. For the first time, the room seemed peaceful. I felt myself exhale. And then I heard it. "You changed your hair." I turned so fast my badge lanyard snapped against my chest. Violet was standing in the bathroom doorway. Only, the door had been open moments ago. I was sure of it. "Oh, yeah," I said, feeling my stomach tighten. "Change. Chopped a few inches off. Just needed a..." She smiled. "He likes women with shorter hair. That's what I had when we met." Then she stepped back into the shadows. I walked away quickly. Later that night, I mentioned the odd encounter to Alicia, the other overnight nurse. She frowned and looked at me like I'd said something troubling. "Miranda. Violet's not allowed on the floor anymore. Doctor had her banned last week." I blinked. "What?" "She was just in the room." "No, she's not supposed to be anywhere near the hospital." We both sat in silence. I didn't know what to say, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know more. It wasn't the first time I'd seen someone after they shouldn't have been there. Hospitals are strange places, full of ghosts, both the metaphorical and sometimes, not to sound unprofessional, ones that feel a little too real. But I've never been a ghost story kind of person. I believe in blood pressure and medication, not cold spots and flickering lights. Still, something about room 509 was off. At 2:15 a.m., I went back to check Herman's vitals again. I hesitated outside the room, half expecting Violet to be sitting in that chair again. But when I stepped in, the room was silent. Just Mr. Lane, still asleep. I glanced at the tray table. There was a napkin on it. Not one from the hospital. The fabric looked too soft, too floral, folded in half. Curiosity 1. Inside was handwriting. Delicate, loopy cursive. "Thank you for not judging me. He needs someone who stays." My breath caught. I flipped it over. A simple drawing. A daisy, unevenly sketched. Just like the ones my brother used to draw when he was afraid. Before his heart surgeries, he'd leave one on my pillow. Always the same daisy. Always a note. "You stay, right?" I sank into the chair in the hallway and just stared at the paper. None of this made sense. I tucked the napkin into my scrub pocket and finished my shift in a haze. That morning, I walked past room 509 one last time before clocking out. The door was closed. It stayed closed the next night. The nurse on call told me Herman had coded at 4:12 a.m. They tried, but there was nothing to be done. Room 509 was empty now. Lights off. Silent. But the elevator outside kept opening, then closing. No one around. It dinged every 5 minutes. When we called maintenance, they said there was nothing wrong with the system. I didn't ask about Violet. I didn't want to know. I didn't sleep after that shift. I sat in my apartment, the napkin unfolded on the kitchen table, coffee gone cold beside it. The writing wasn't just familiar in its tone. It was in his style. My brother had a very specific way of forming his E's, like tiny loops barely closed at the top. I told myself it was coincidence. People repeat habits. People mimic each other. But it itched at something deep in my chest that I couldn't scratch away. The next few nights, room 509 stayed empty. I requested to avoid it during my rounds, but the charge nurse laughed like I was joking. "It's an empty room," she said. "What, you scared of an empty bed?" I gave a half-hearted smile and walked away. On Friday, we got a new patient in 509. I overheard the assignment during huddle. "Mr. Patel, post-bypass, 74, alert, stable, had a daughter who stayed through the evening. I walked past the room at 1 a.m. The lights were dim. Mr. Patel was asleep. The daughter had gone home. Nothing unusual until I caught a shape in the reflection of the window. A woman, beige cardigan, just brushing past the corner of the bed. I spun around. No one there. I stood in the doorway, staring into the shadows. "Is someone there?" I whispered, before I even realized what I was saying. Silence. Then the faintest rustle, like fabric brushing over plastic. My throat dried out. My fingers hovered over my radio, debating if I should call for someone else. But what would I even say? "Can someone check the room with me because I think I saw a ghost?" It sounded ridiculous even in my head. I stepped inside. The room was colder than the others. I checked the vents. Nothing was blowing. The thermostat read 71. I double-checked Mr. Patel's vitals and quickly left. At the nurse's station, I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was the reflection, the fatigue, maybe the stress finally boiling over. But just before dawn, when I went to grab supplies from the storage closet down the hall, I heard something again. A whisper, faint. "I stay because they forget." I froze, my back pressed against the wall. I waited. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just the soft humming of machines and distant hallway lights flickering. When I stepped into the supply room, one of the gowns had fallen off its hook. Beneath it, another napkin, folded the same way, same cursive. They always forget. That's when they leave. I didn't tell anyone this time. I kept it in my locker, beneath my lunch. When I got home that morning, I dug through the box in my closet, the one labeled Nate stuff. Inside were old drawings, school papers, and one of his final notes from the hospital before his last surgery. A daisy, same lines, same curves. I had buried him 5 years ago. So how was his handwriting in a room he'd never been near? The next week, the elevator broke. Or at least that's what they told us. Engineers came up twice. I overheard one of them mutter, "Nothing wrong with the wiring. Doors just keep opening on their own." He joked it was a ghost. We all laughed, but the kind of laugh that ends in silence too quickly. Room 509 had been empty again for 2 nights after Mr. Patel got discharged. I hadn't stepped foot inside, but on Tuesday night the call light went off. Room 509. That was impossible. No one had been assigned there. I double-checked the board. Still empty. I radioed the desk. "Is anyone supposed to be in 509? Static. Then a response. "Not that I know of. Could be a glitch." The light stayed on. Steady. Red. I decided to check it myself. Half out of duty, half because some part of me needed to see it. The hallway was unusually quiet. My footsteps echoed. As I reached the door, I hesitated. I had my badge, my pen light, my pager. None of them helped steady my breath. I knocked. Nothing. I pushed the door open slowly. The lights were off. Moonlight from the window bathed the room in a soft glow. And someone was sitting in the chair by the bed. I couldn't see her face, but I knew that cardigan. Beige. Worn at the sleeves. Her head was tilted down, brushing something. It took a second to see the outline of a person in the bed, eyes closed, chest not moving. The woman reached forward, gently tucking a lock of hair behind his ear, the same way my mother used to do for Nate when he was sick. I opened my mouth. "Mrs. Lane?" She looked up, slowly, her face pale, eyes wide, but no fear in them. "You're the one who stays," she said softly. My throat tightened. "Why are you here?" I asked, quieter than I intended. Her smile twitched. I never left, and neither did he. The lights flickered. I blinked. She was gone. The chair was empty. The bed was neatly made. No one was there. But on the tray table, another napkin. This one had no writing, just a daisy. I backed out of the room slowly, closed the door, and walked straight to the staff restroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the closed toilet and stared at the napkin in my shaking hands. Whatever was happening wasn't just some stress-induced vision. I knew what I saw, and something, wanted to be seen. I didn't report it. That night, after seeing her, after seeing them, I finished my shift in silence. There was no protocol for this, no checkbox in the charting software for hallucination or haunting. Besides, I was barely clinging to the job as it was, and part of me thought maybe I'd finally cracked. Divorce, grief, nights alone in echoing hallways, but deep down I didn't think I imagined her, or him. The next evening I walked into the staff lounge and found a folded note in my locker. No envelope, just paper. 509 reassigned, second floor transferring a patient tonight, please prepare room. Charge. My heart sank. I was off rotation for the night, but I couldn't stop thinking about that room. I kept checking the screen at the nurse's station. Eventually, a name popped in. J. Cooper, 63, CHF complications, admitted from ER. Room 509 lit up in green, occupied. I kept watching the clock, watching the hallway. 1 a.m. came, 1:05, 1:10. Then the elevator dinged. It opened, but no one came out. I stood. I don't know what made me walk down that hall again. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just didn't want anyone else to walk in blind like I had. As I reached the door, it was slightly ajar. Again, I knocked, pushed it open. Mr. Cooper was asleep, oxygen line in his nose, heart monitor ticking slow but steady. And Violet was back, sitting beside the bed, staring straight ahead. She didn't blink. She didn't look at me. I cleared my throat. Mrs. Lane, you can't be in here. Still nothing. Who are you staying for now? I asked quietly. Only then did her eyes move. Her pupils seemed too wide for the room's light. He's alone, she whispered. They always are. I looked at the man in the bed. He's not Herman. No, she said. But he will be. The air dropped in temperature. The monitor let out a sharp beep. Sudden bradycardia. I moved quickly, stepping past her and checking the machine. His vitals were dropping. I hit the call button. As I reached for the crash cart, I turned to glance back. But Violet was gone. Just the chair. Just the napkin on the floor. I knelt down to grab it as the team rushed in behind me. I stay for the forgotten. By some miracle, we stabilized Mr. Cooper. He lived, but he was moved to another floor later that week. Nobody asked me what happened. Nobody needed to. It's been 5 years since that shift. I left St. Ridge 6 months later. Got a job at a private practice. Days only. Bright, busy, safe. But sometimes, late at night, I'll still hear that elevator ding in my dreams, and I'll see her, Violet, sitting beside a bed, her hands folded, her eyes just watching, waiting for someone who won't come back. I still have those napkins. All 4 of them. I keep them in a box beside my brother's old drawings. I used to think she was a ghost, a remnant, a tragedy that clung to that room. But now I wonder if she was something else. A warning, maybe. Or a reminder. Hospitals treat the body. But people carry pain that medicine can't reach, grief that lingers, love that won't let go, and loneliness so deep it becomes its own kind of haunting. The lesson I learned in room 509 is this: not all who stay behind do so willingly, and not everyone who leaves truly goes. But more than anything, when people are hurting, being present matters more than you think. Sometimes staying, even silently, makes all the difference. Even when no one thanks you, even when no one remembers, because someone always does. When I think back to that winter of 2009, it feels like remembering someone else's life. I was 22, a lit major who thought the world was still something you could read your way through, page by page. My nights belonged to a second-hand book cafe on the edge of the Yorkshire moors. It was a strange little place, half shop, half coffee house. where worn-out novels sat stacked beside chipped mugs, and where the regulars were a mix of insomniac students, retired teachers, and the occasional lost tourist. Working those late shifts gave me the quiet I craved. Most nights, after locking the register and sweeping up pastry crumbs, I'd head out with my sketch pad stuffed in my satchel. I'd stop to draw some crooked stone fence or an abandoned farmhouse, adding lines in the cold until my fingers were numb. Architecture fascinated me, the way a ruined church tower could carry 100 years of storms and still refuse to collapse. My sketchbooks were filled with arches, bridges, roof lines. Maybe part of me believed if I could capture something solid on paper, I'd hold myself together too. Life had pressed me into frugality. My father left when I was 13. He slipped away like it was the easiest thing in the world, leaving my mother with hospital bills and me with a growing list of part-time jobs. She'd gotten sick not long after, her heart weak, her breathing short. College was a privilege I'd fought for with long hours and little money, and the book cafe was just another stepping stone. To stretch every pound, I avoided taxis. Instead, I walked. Always. The path home was an old service road that cut through neglected farmland, fields broken by sagging barns and hedgerows. It was quiet, desolate, and it cost nothing but the scrape of my boots. The locals didn't approve. Some warned me about gangs or drifters, about kids testing themselves with violence in lonely places. "Don't tempt fate, lad," one man told me once when I mentioned the road. I laughed it off at the time. I was young, stubborn, and thought danger was something that only existed in films or police reports. Besides, most nights it was just me, the wind off the moors, and a sky scattered with stars. On December 14th, the cafe had been busy. A group of American tourists had wandered in, eager to sip coffee among dusty shelves. They tipped generously, probably mistaking the place for some quaint cultural attraction, instead of the drafty, underpaid reality it was. By the time I locked up after midnight, I felt unusually flush. My coat was buttoned to my throat, my satchel heavy against my hip, my earphones spilling soft piano into the night. For once I felt lighthearted. The service road was crusted with frost, every blade of grass shining pale in the moonlight. My breath fogged in front of me. I shoved my hands deep in my pockets and let the music carry me. That's when the glow of headlights stretched across the lane behind me. A car. It crawled forward, too slow to be a passerby, too deliberate to be chance. My steps faltered. The sedan, dark, older, low, rolled ahead, then stopped about 100 meters up. Motionless. The piano in my ears suddenly felt too fragile. I tugged one bud out, listening. The engine idled, steady but low. My stomach knotted. I told myself they were checking a map, maybe lost. But the voice in my head that remembered a classmate mugged on this very road 2 years before whispered otherwise. I crossed to the other side of the lane, quick, pretending not to notice. That's when the headlights snapped off. No door opened, but I heard it. Gravel shifting. Footsteps, faint, deliberate. The cold bit deeper, a sting against my neck. My pulse thudded. I ran. The fields opened to my right, ragged fences barely holding themselves up. I vaulted one, my boots sinking into mud that grabbed like glue. My sketch pad knocked against my ribs as I crouched by a hedge, heart hammering, trying to breathe through my nose so the sound wouldn't carry. The footsteps crunched closer. Not hurried, not frantic. Slow. Measured. Whoever it was they wanted me to hear. My phone buzzed, the screen flaring with a low battery warning. I fumbled to kill it, jamming it deep into my coat so the glow wouldn't betray me. I pressed my forehead to the cold earth and waited. Minutes dragged into hours, or maybe it was only a handful of seconds stretched thin by fear. The footsteps stopped. Silence spread across the field, heavy as fog. For one terrible moment, I thought they were crouched just beyond the hedge, waiting. My breath came shallow. Then the engine coughed to life again. Tires crunched, but instead of leaving, the car rolled farther down the road. I risked a glance through the branches. Its taillights were gone. Relief barely touched me before the sound of reversing gravel returned. The car was backing up, Lights still off, prowling the lane like a predator scenting prey. Running back toward the road meant exposing myself. The only escape lay deeper into the hedges, toward the line of woods that marked the old railway track. I pushed through thorns that clawed at my sleeve, tearing fabric, scratching skin. Branches cracked underfoot, each sound too loud in the dead night. My lungs burned with cold air, but I didn't stop until I saw the skeletal outline of the abandoned bridge rising above the trees. I slowed, gasping, thinking I'd shaken them. Then I saw it. The car, parked at the far end of the bridge, as though it had been waiting all along. A dark shape against darker shadows. Panic surged, white-hot. I turned, stumbling down the embankment into the frozen creek below. My knees scraped rock. Mud smeared my palms. I pressed myself against the icy stone of the bridge's underbelly, pulling my coat tight, listening to my heartbeat pound like a drum. The engine above rumbled faintly, then quiet. I shut my eyes, willing myself invisible, willing whoever they were to get bored, to vanish back into the night. Eventually, mercifully, the sound of tires grating faded. I didn't move until silence felt real again. When I finally climbed out of that creek, I wasn't the same. Fear had settled into my bones, colder than the frost. I limped home, blood crusted on my knees, sketch pad still clutched like a shield. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every blink was headlights. Every creak of the house was footsteps in the dark. The next morning, the cafe smelled of burnt coffee and dust. I dragged myself behind the counter, pale, shaking, trying to steady my hands enough to count change. Customers asked if I was sick. I lied and said it was just a cold. Inside, the night kept replaying, headlights, footsteps, silence. Later that week, I stopped at the police station to warm up while waiting for a bus. 2 officers were talking by the front desk, their voices low but sharp. Something about men arrested after an attack on a farmer a few miles out. Words like gang initiation, brutal, and ritual drifted over. My skin prickled. The timing matched. The area matched. My gut told me it was the same car, the same men. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to say, I saw them. They followed me. But the words stuck. If I admitted I'd been stupid enough to walk that road alone, if I told them I'd hidden like a rabbit under a bridge, what good would it do? They already had their suspects. My fear was mine alone, a secret carved into the marrow of my nights. I never told my mother either. She had enough worry. Her health, the bills, the missing pieces of our family. What comfort would it give her to know her only son had nearly been swallowed by shadows? None. So I swallowed it instead. But something inside me changed. I stopped walking that service road. I started carrying more than my sketch pad. One evening, I sharpened the steel tip of my fountain pen until it could pierce cloth. I slipped it into my coat pocket before every shift. A makeshift weapon, small but solid, something to grip if the night turned on me again. I tried to pretend life was normal, but the cafe felt different. Customers' faces blurred, their chatter faded. Every time headlights swept past the window, my chest tightened. The piano music I once loved now reminded me of how it sounded when danger slid into silence. Weeks bled into months, but the fear never really left. Friends invited me out, but I declined. Nights were quieter alone, safer. I sketched less too. Every time I pulled out my pad, my hand shook, the pencil scratching like gravel under boots. One night, my coworker Sam noticed me fiddling with the pen in my pocket. "You writing a novel in there?" he joked, pointing at my coat. "Something like that," I muttered. He laughed, not knowing. Nobody really knew. I carried the weight like a hidden scar, invisible but always tender to the touch. It wasn't just fear of those men. It was fear of the randomness. One night I was just a tired student walking home. The next I was prey in a field, hunted for reasons I couldn't comprehend. The world had shifted, and I no longer believed safety was guaranteed. The bridge haunted me most. The way they seemed to anticipate me, waiting on the other side. I replayed it endlessly, trying to figure if they knew the land better than I did, or if it was just coincidence. Either answer was terrifying. I kept drawing, though. Churches, rooftops, arches, structures that outlasted storms. Maybe it was my way of reminding myself that some things endured, even when people didn't. By spring, the cafe had slowed. Tourists were gone, locals returned to their routines. I worked fewer hours, spent more time at home with my mother. She'd watch me sketch at the kitchen table, never guessing that every line was drawn with trembling hands. Sometimes I dreamed of confronting those men, of standing tall with my sharpened pen like some avenger from the novels I shelved at work. But the truth was simpler. Survival wasn't about fighting. It was about running, hiding, keeping quiet until danger passed. I hated that truth, but I clung to it because it kept me alive. Years later, I can still hear the footsteps in that field. I can still see the car idling with its lights off, patient as death. I never took the service road again. I never trusted silence in the same way. But I carried on. I kept sketching. I kept working. I kept living. And that's what matters. Fear teaches us the fragility of safety, but it also teaches us vigilance. Sometimes survival means swallowing pride, admitting vulnerability, and choosing the longer, safer road. The world can turn dangerous without warning, yet we can still carry on, scarred, shaken, but wiser. I was never much of a traveler. I liked the comfort of my little kitchen in Vermont, the hum of the sewing machine, and the smell of fabric softener clinging to half-finished quilts stacked in neat piles. My joys were quiet ones: quilting circles at church, Sunday crossword puzzles, and a small tin box I kept by the window, stuffed with vintage postcards I'd collected from flea markets and antique shops. My husband Harold, on the other hand, always had his eyes on the horizon. He'd been a history teacher for more than 30 years, and after retiring he filled notebooks with descriptions of the old towns and ports along the East Coast, sketching church steeples, bridges, and maps that he never managed to publish. By 1996, Harold was restless. Our grandchildren were old enough to sit through long car rides without too much fuss, and he insisted it was the perfect chance for one last family road trip. He wanted to show the kids the places he'd written about in his journals, the stories behind forgotten harbors and battlefields. At first I balked. The thought of endless hours in the car and strange beds each night didn't appeal to me. But the way our grandchildren's eyes lit up at the idea of an adventure softened me. I told myself I'd bring along my quilting basket and my postcard tin to keep me grounded. The first few days were pleasant enough. We made it down through Massachusetts and into Maryland with only minor squabbles in the back seat. Harold would point out landmarks, and the kids would pretend to be impressed while sneaking candy from the cooler. I wrote little notes on postcards each night, sometimes just one sentence about the weather or the diner we stopped at. They were small anchors to remind me I was still myself, even on the road. That Friday, the rain caught us in Delaware. Heavy sheets of it, the kind that make your headlights look useless, pounding so hard on the windshield it felt like the car was underwater. Harold was determined to push through, but even he admitted defeat when the children started nodding off in the back seat and his knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. By the time we saw the flickering neon sign of a roadside inn just outside Seaford, it was nearly midnight. The inn looked worn down but welcoming enough. Paint peeling from the siding, curtains drawn tight in the windows. The storm made everything feel lonelier, like the world had shrunk to just that little patch of parking lot. We checked in with a tired-looking woman at the desk, lugged our bags upstairs, and finally collapsed in our room. It smelled faintly of damp carpet and lemon polish. The kids sprawled on the bed while Harold fussed with the thermostat. I pulled out my postcards and began scribbling notes about the drive, about how the rain blurred the highway lights until they looked like smudges of watercolor. That's when it came, the knock. At first, I thought it was just the wind rattling the door. But then it came again, firm and deliberate. Harold frowned, walked to the window, and peeked through the curtain. His shoulders stiffened. 4 men stood in the hallway, 3 broad-shouldered younger ones in leather jackets, and an older man leaning heavily on a cane. None of them were smiling. Harold tried to keep his voice calm. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked through the door. The older man stepped forward, his face pale under the yellow hallway light. His voice rasped, cracked like old wood. "Sorry to disturb you folks. Something important was left in this room earlier. A box, small, wooden. We need to come in. Won't take long." My stomach clenched. "We just checked in," Harold answered. "You must have the wrong room." The man's politeness vanished. His tone sharpened, low and commanding. "This is the room. Open it or we'll open it for you." I froze. My eyes darted to the children, their sleepy faces turning alert, wide-eyed. Without thinking, I whispered, "Bathroom. Lock the door. Stay quiet." The kids scrambled, their little feet padding across the carpet. The click of the bathroom lock felt too loud. One of the younger men shifted, and in that dim light I saw it. The outline of a gun tucked into his waistband. My heart pounded so hard I thought they'd hear it. Harold stood straighter, blocking the door with his body. "Look around you," he said firmly. "We've just arrived. Our bags are still half-packed. We don't have whatever you're looking for." The old man tilted his head, his cane tapping against the floor. "People lie when they're protecting their children. Don't make me prove a point in front of yours." The words chilled me. My hands shook so badly I grabbed my postcard tin just to feel something solid, something mine. My mind flashed back to when I was a girl during the blizzard of '62. We'd hidden in the cellar while the wind screamed, my father whispering, "Fear is smaller in the dark if you stay quiet." I clung to that memory like a rope. The men pressed closer. The doorknob rattled under their weight. Harold braced himself, jaw tight. I could see the calculation in his eyes. If the door gave, he'd have to fight them long enough for me to get the kids out. My throat was dry, but I whispered, "Harold?" And then, salvation came from the hallway. "Hey, what the hell's going on here?" The innkeeper stood there, wiry and furious, gripping a baseball bat like he knew how to use it. The four men froze. The old one's eyes flicked toward the stairs. Without another word, they turned and disappeared into the storm, leather jackets glistening with rain as they vanished into the night. We didn't breathe until we heard the door downstairs slam shut. The police came 20 minutes later, called by the innkeeper. They searched the hallways, the parking lot, even the tree line beyond the motel. Nothing. The men were gone as if the storm had swallowed them. The officer taking our statement asked careful questions. Did they say what they were looking for? "A wooden box," I answered, still clutching my tin of postcards. They said it belonged to them, or their brother, or something. But we'd never seen it. The officer's pen paused mid-scribble. He exchanged a look with his partner, then asked, "Did they describe it?" "No, just small, wooden." Harold sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "We only checked in an hour ago. There was nothing in the room." The officers couldn't explain it. The innkeeper swore no one had stayed in that room earlier that day. The guest log confirmed it, and no one in town matched the description of the four men. After they left, the kids crept back from the bathroom, faces pale, eyes glassy. I tried to steady myself for them, smoothing their hair, whispering that it was all over. But inside, I shook. The way that old man had spoken, as if he knew exactly what was in our room, wouldn't leave my mind. We didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every hiss of wind made me jump. Harold pretended to read one of his journals, but I could see the way his hand twitched, restless. The children finally drifted off, huddled together like puppies, while I sat in the chair by the window staring at the rain. By dawn, the storm had cleared, leaving the parking lot glittering with puddles. We checked out quickly, thanking the innkeeper in hushed voices. He only nodded, eyes shadowed with worry. As we drove away, the neon sign flickered behind us, growing smaller in the rearview mirror. But the feeling of being hunted lingered, riding with us down the highway. The trip continued, though it didn't feel like the same vacation anymore. The children were quieter, Harold more protective. I kept checking our motel doors twice, then 3 times, before bed. Every knock, even from room service, made me flinch. In North Carolina, I wandered into an antique shop while Harold showed the kids an old church. A shelf of wooden trinket boxes caught my eye, some carved, some plain, all harmless. Still, when I touched one, my hand shook. The memory of that man's voice came back. "This is the room. Open it, or we'll open it for you." I left the shop without buying a thing. At night, I quilted in silence, the steady rhythm of the needle-piercing fabric like the sharp knocks on that motel door. Each stitch reminded me how fragile safety was, how quickly it could unravel. Months later, back home in Vermont, I still wasn't the same. The locks on our doors were checked twice, sometimes 3 times before I allowed myself to sleep. I startled at sudden noises. The children still asked in hushed tones about the men in the hallway. The police never found them. The wooden box was never explained. Some said it was just thieves. Others said it might have been worse. I tried not to dwell on it, but the memory lingered like a stain. Even now, when I sit by the window with my postcards spread out like little fragments of other people's journeys, I think of that night. The knock at midnight, the old man's threat, the way Harold stood firm, the children's trust in us, the thin line between danger and safety. You never truly know how strong you are until you are forced to stand between danger and the people you love. Fear doesn't vanish, it lingers, it shapes you. But courage is found in the moments you act despite that fear. And sometimes the simplest things, a locked door, a steady voice, the memory of a parent's wisdom, can mean the difference between surviving the night and being swallowed by it. I never thought my life would twist into the kind of story people whisper about over coffee, the kind that sounds too strange to be real until you're the one living it. My name is Clara Whitmore. I was 29 years old in 2012 when I found myself working the night shift at a psychiatric asylum that had been converted into a rehabilitation center. It sat on the edge of Bristol like a relic the city wanted to forget but couldn't quite bury. The decision wasn't simple. I had studied painting in college, dreamed of becoming an art therapist, and for a while, I really believed my life would be about helping people heal through color and expression. Then came the accident. My fiancé, Michael, was killed in a car crash on a rain-slicked road outside Portsmouth. One minute I was planning our wedding. The next, I was signing papers at a morgue. After that, paint lost its meaning. I couldn't look at a canvas without feeling like I was staring at a hollow life I'd never have again. Bills piled up. Grief doesn't pay the rent. I drifted into nursing, first out of necessity, then routine. When the position at the asylum opened, I told myself the night shift would be easier, quieter. I thought maybe the silence would help me sort out the noise in my head. From the outside, the building looked more like a fortress than a hospital. Red brick, narrow windows, and those heavy iron doors that looked as though they hadn't been changed since the 19th century. Inside, the corridors stretched long and narrow, with ceilings high enough to swallow sound. Every step echoed back at you. Even when I wasn't alone, I felt like I was. My shift began at 11:45 each night. I'd walk the halls with a clipboard, check vitals, update charts, and sometimes sit in the infirmary to finish paperwork. The patients were mostly stable, recovering addicts, a few with severe depression, some with disorders that needed monitoring. They slept through most of the night, leaving the halls still. Too still. That first week, I brushed off the oddities. A door slamming down the corridor when I knew it was locked. A pen rolling off the desk after I'd set it flat. I told myself it was fatigue, my imagination, or maybe just the old bones of the building creaking. But deep down, I knew better. The first time something truly unsettled me was during my third shift. I was in the infirmary finishing paperwork. The office door was locked. I always checked it twice because the patients weren't supposed to wander in. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable click of the lock, the slow creak of the door opening halfway, and then, slam. The noise was so sharp my pen rolled off the desk. I rushed to the door. It was still locked, bolted from the inside. My keys were the only set assigned that night. I stood there staring at it, heart hammering, until I convinced myself exhaustion was making me hear things. But the incidents grew harder to dismiss. My stethoscope disappeared one evening. I turned the infirmary upside down looking for it, only to find it hours later balanced on a shelf in the patient library, a place I hadn't stepped foot in. When I mentioned it in the break room, the other nurses chuckled and said I was scatterbrained. I wanted to believe them, but that wasn't who I was. Then came the chairs. I'd stepped out of the infirmary to check vitals. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. When I came back, every chair was lined up neatly facing the door like an audience waiting for me. My legs nearly gave out under me. No one else had keys to that room, and even if they did, who would bother with such a cruel prank? Fear settled into me like damp air. I carried my grief quietly, but I knew fear when it pressed cold fingers against my spine. I heard footsteps trailing me down locked corridors. I smelled disinfectant laced with something metallic, like old blood. And one night, while filing charts, I swore I heard my fiancé's name whispered right behind my ear. By late October, I refused to sit in the infirmary alone. I moved my station to the officer's desk near the main ward, where the overhead lights buzzed too brightly, but at least I could see. Just past midnight, I glanced at the security monitor and froze. On the screen, the infirmary door, the one I had locked myself, was swinging open. Slowly, inch by inch, until it gaped wide. No one stepped through. Then, with a sudden violence, it slammed shut so hard the monitor flickered. My hands shook as I reached for the walkie-talkie, but before I could call anyone, I saw something else. One of the chairs inside the infirmary slid several inches across the floor. No one was in sight. I didn't go near that room again. From then on, if I had to drop off supplies or collect charts, I asked one of the aides to come with me. Most nights I found excuses to stay away entirely. The other staff didn't press me, but I caught their looks, half amusement, half unease. They had worked there longer. Maybe they knew things I didn't. The building seemed to change after that. The corridors felt narrower. The shadows stretched longer. Sometimes I'd hear the faint metallic clank of locks turning when no one was near. Sometimes I'd smell candle wax, even though the place forbade open flames. And always the nights dragged on. The silence was no comfort. It was the kind of silence that watched you. The last straw came in December. Snow pressed against the windows, muting the world outside. I was stationed near the main desk, the patients asleep, when the power flickered. The monitors blinked, and for just a second, every screen showed the same thing: the infirmary, doors swinging, chairs scraping across the floor on their own. I ran, not from the building. I still had patients under my care, but to the break room, where another nurse sat reading. I must have looked pale as death because she stood right up and asked, "Clara, what happened?" I couldn't tell her. I just shook my head, muttered something about not feeling well, and sat there until my shift ended. 2 weeks later, I handed in my resignation. I took a lower-paying job at a clinic in town, treating coughs and sprained ankles. It was dull, but safe. At least the walls didn't whisper, but safety was an illusion. Some nights back at my apartment, I'd take out a sketch pad just to calm my nerves. I hadn't drawn in years, but the pencil seemed to move on its own. Door frames, hinges, empty chairs. Again and again. Even now, years later, I don't talk about that job. People want their nurses steady, rational, reliable. Telling them you left a position because the walls moved on their own doesn't inspire confidence. But when the clock slides past midnight, when the world is quiet, I sometimes hear it again. The sound of metal doors unlocking somewhere just beyond my apartment walls. And when my pencil slips circling shadows I can't name, I know I never truly left that place. Grief leaves us raw, and in that rawness, we often walk into places we shouldn't. Fear, like grief, does not vanish when you run. It follows, it waits, it shapes you. What I learned in those long nights is that ignoring your fear only gives it more power. You can't always explain what haunts you, but you can choose when to step away before it consumes you. Sometimes survival is not about fighting. It's about knowing when it's time to leave. I wasn't supposed to be working the night shift forever. That's what I told myself every time I pulled my hoodie tighter and listened to the hum of the dryers at 2 a.m. The laundromat wasn't much. Cracked tile floors, buzzing fluorescent lights that gave everyone's skin a sickly tint, a broken soda machine with a handwritten "out of order" sign taped to it. But it was steady, and after the last 2 years of my life, steady was the best I could ask for. I'd been reckless once, drinking too much, cutting class, hanging around with people who thrived on chaos. It cost me almost everything: my grades, my scholarships, a couple friendships that weren't worth saving anyway. By 21, I'd had enough of watching my life spiral. So I quit the parties, picked up night shifts at this 24-hour laundromat in Dayton, and tried to keep my head down. I used to dream about being a photographer. I carried my camera everywhere in high school, capturing rusty bridges, abandoned houses, sunlight slanting through windows. But by now the camera lived on a shelf in my closet, covered in dust. Life became about folding shirts that weren't mine, sweeping lint from under machines, waiting for sunrise so I could sleep through the daylight. Most nights were quiet. A few regulars came in, people on odd schedules, factory workers, single moms, college kids avoiding crowds. I recognized faces, learned who liked the corner machine, who always forgot quarters. It was lonely, but safe. Until the night Alan walked in. I knew him the second I saw him. Same pale skin, same oversized glasses sliding down his nose. He looked older, of course, but not by much. Back in high school, we used to call him Chess Boy. He'd carry pieces in his pockets, fiddling with them in class. He was awkward, soft-spoken, the kind of kid cruel teenagers circle like sharks. I was part of that circle. I laughed at him. I joined in the jokes. I never apologized. That night he walked in with a duffel bag, gave me a quick glance, and dropped his laundry into a washer without a word. I felt my stomach twist, memories rushing back sharper than I wanted. He didn't say anything else, just waited for the machine to start and sat down in the corner. I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence. People grow up, people move on. But he kept coming back. The first few times I tried to ignore it. He'd show up just after midnight, same duffel bag, same quiet presence in the corner. Sometimes he wouldn't even do laundry, just sit there while the hum of the machines filled the silence. He'd nod at me, maybe smile faintly, but say almost nothing. Then came the little gifts. One night, he set a chess pawn on the counter. A black one, worn smooth like he'd carried it for years. "Thought you might remember," he murmured. His voice was low, softer than I remembered, but it cut right through me. Another night it was a pack of gum, my favorite brand from high school. He slid it across the counter without explanation. I thanked him awkwardly, unsure what else to do. The worst was the photograph. He handed it to me carefully, like it was something precious. At first, I didn't recognize it. Then I did. It was me at the county fair, maybe 16, laughing with a snow cone in my hand. I had no idea the picture even existed. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my throat tight. "I took it," he said simply. "You looked happy. I thought you should have it." Something in me wanted to run. I forced a smile instead, slid the photo back toward him and said, "That's nice of you, but you should keep it." His face tightened, almost disappointed, but he pocketed the picture and said nothing more. After that, I started keeping my phone close. I told my manager about it, but she brushed it off. "As long as he's paying for the machines, he's a customer. If he bothers you, call the cops." Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one staring at the clock, waiting for midnight, wondering if he'd walk in again. And of course he did. It was a Thursday when things shifted. Business had been slow. Just an old man washing blankets and a college kid dozing in the corner. By 1 a.m. they were gone, and it was just me and Alan. I bent to grab detergent, and suddenly his hand closed over mine, cold, tight, holding me in place. "I waited for you," he whispered. His breath smelled faintly of mint gum. "All these years?" I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. I yanked my hand back, stumbling a step. "Alan, stop. You can't." His eyes searched mine, wide and unblinking. "That prank back then," I rushed out, words tumbling. "It was cruel. I was cruel. But I don't feel that way about you. I never did." Something cracked in his face. The softness vanished, replaced by something jagged. His voice trembled. "You don't get to walk away from me again." Before I could answer, the laundromat door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. Neither of us had touched it. He stood there breathing heavy, fists clenched. Then he turned and stormed out into the night. I locked the doors after that, hands shaking so badly I could barely twist the key. I called my manager. She sighed, told me again to call the police if he came back. The police were polite but firm. Unless he threatened me again, there wasn't much they could do. So I waited. Every shift after that felt like balancing on the edge of a blade. Each click of the washers made me jump. Each shadow outside the window made my stomach drop. I started keeping my camera behind the counter. Not for art. Those days were long gone. But for proof. If he came back, if he did anything, I wanted evidence. Something real, something I could hand over to people who dismissed me with sympathetic smiles. The first night he didn't show, I almost convinced myself it was over. The second night too. But on the third, just after midnight, the door creaked open and there he was. "Vanessa," he said softly, as if we were old friends. "Alan, you can't come here anymore." My voice shook, but I forced myself to stand tall. He tilted his head. "I just wanted to see you. You scared me." His face twitched, confusion flickering across it. "I wouldn't hurt you. Not you." "Then prove it. Leave me alone." For a moment he looked like he might argue. Then he backed away slowly, pushing the door open. "You'll miss me," he said quietly, and slipped into the night. I locked the door the second he was gone, then slid down behind the counter, trembling so hard I thought my bones might rattle apart. I stopped working nights 2 weeks later. I told my manager I couldn't do it anymore. She rolled her eyes but shuffled the schedule. I didn't care. I couldn't keep waiting for that door to open. Alan didn't come back while I was there. Maybe he found another laundromat. Maybe he got bored. Or maybe he's still out there, waiting for the right midnight to show up again. Sometimes I catch myself looking over my shoulder when I walk home, listening for footsteps that match mine. I still keep my camera close. Not for art, not yet, but for safety. A lens doesn't stop someone, but it can capture the truth when no one else will believe you. I think about him sometimes, about the boy we laughed at in high school, about the way cruelty sticks like gum to the bottom of your shoe, following you for years. I wonder if I helped make him into what he became, or if he was always going to break this way. I'll never know. All I can do now is keep moving forward, keep working, keep living. And maybe one day I'll pick up the camera again, not because I'm afraid, but because I remember why I loved seeing the world through it in the first place. The past doesn't disappear just because we grow older. The way we treat people leaves echoes that can resurface when we least expect it. Kindness costs little, but cruelty can leave scars on both sides. We cannot always control who others become, but we can control how we treat them. And sometimes, that choice makes all the difference. I never pictured myself working the graveyard shift at a roadside diner in the backwoods of Arkansas, but life has a way of cornering you. I used to think I'd be producing albums, building songs out of layered guitars and sampled beats, maybe even working out of a studio in Nashville. That was before my brother died, before the student loans caught up with me, before I realized that dreams don't pay bills and grief has a way of eating through your insides like acid. The diner wasn't much to look at. A converted trailer from the 50s, chrome siding gone dull, neon sign flickering half the time. Highway 165 cut past it like a scar, trucks groaning through at all hours, but the nearest real town was 20 miles off. I got the job because no one else wanted it. 10 at night to 6 in the morning, $7 an hour plus whatever tips wandered in. Mostly it was just me, the hum of the fridge, and the hiss of the fryer. It wasn't all bad. I had a notebook I kept behind the counter filled with scraps of lyrics, lines that might have been songs once. Sometimes when the place was empty and the radio station faded into static, I'd scribble down verses pretending I still had a future in music. But mostly I just poured coffee for truckers, served burgers to drunk drifters, and watched the trees press against the windows like they were listening in. Nights dragged slow. You start to notice every sound when you're alone for hours. The buzz of a fluorescent bulb, the tick of the ceiling fan that never quite balanced, even the scrape of a chair against tile when no one's touched it. After a while, I got used to it. Isolation becomes a routine, until the night it doesn't. That Friday, the storm was already rolling in by 11. Rain on the roof like gravel, wind rattling the metal frame of the diner. No cars outside, no door chime. Just me cleaning counters, listening to thunder. That's when they showed up. 2 men, out of nowhere. I didn't hear the door. No squeak of the hinges, no jingle of the chime. Just 2 shapes suddenly standing there, one at the counter, the other near the jukebox. For a second I thought maybe I'd nodded off. Maybe I was dreaming them. But the one at the counter smiled, ordered pie and black coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. The other just stood there, damp clothes clinging to him, eyes locked on me. I told myself it was fine. Customers were customers. But my gut knew better. The one at the counter was friendly enough, or at least pretending. He tapped the formica with his fingers, made small talk about the storm, asked how long I'd been working nights. His eyes never quite settled, though, drifting toward the cash register, the exits, the clock above the door. I've been around enough hustlers to recognize a man casing the room. The other guy stayed near the jukebox. He didn't pick a song, just leaned against it, arms crossed, watching me with a stillness that made my skin itch. Every time I glanced his way, he tilted his head like he was memorizing me. His boots left wet prints across the tile. I never heard him breathe. I tried to act normal, wiping counters, filling coffee. I told myself not to show nerves. Out here 20 miles from the nearest help, you learn quick. If someone senses fear, they use it. The counter guy paid with a crumpled bill. I gave him change, turned to grab napkins, and when I looked back, the other one was gone. Just gone. The restroom door was wide open, both booths empty. I walked a few steps, pretending to check the coffee pots, but my chest was hammering. Where the hell had he gone? The storm picked up, wind howling through the thin trailer walls. I told myself maybe he'd slipped outside, maybe I just didn't hear. But I knew better. The air felt heavy, like I wasn't alone. By midnight, I'd locked the side door and kept one hand near the flashlight under the counter. I wanted to call the cops, but what would I say? 2 men came in, 1 disappeared. Out here they'd laugh, tell me to get some sleep. So I waited, pretending nothing was wrong. At 12:24, everything went black. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. Neon sign outside too. Just the sound of rain and the occasional flash of lightning throwing the diner into white shapes and shadows. I fumbled for the flashlight. Before I clicked it on, I heard it, the slow scrape of a boot across tile. Someone was inside. My throat tightened. Hello? My voice cracked. Silence, then a low voice from the dark. We know you've got cash here, don't be stupid. My fingers finally hit the switch. The beam cut through the dark, landing on him. The quiet one, standing 10 feet away. His face was drawn, pale, eyes shining like a coyote's in the light. In his hand was a crowbar tapping lightly against his palm. I swung the flashlight toward the counter. Empty. The friendly one was gone. They'd been working together. One distracted me, the other waited. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll open the register, just take the money." I moved slow, every muscle tight. The drawer popped open with a ding that felt too loud in the silence. $300 maybe. He snatched it, stuffed it into his jacket, but he didn't leave. He lingered in the doorway, crowbar still in hand, staring at me with a grin that made my stomach drop. "Funny thing," he muttered. "Places like this, nobody hears you scream at midnight." For a second I thought he'd swing. I gripped the flashlight like a weapon, ready to blind him if I had to. But then he turned, slipped into the storm, and the door banged shut behind him. I locked it, bolted it, dragged a chair under the handle. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the keys twice. The rest of the night, I sat on the floor behind the counter, flashlight aimed at the door, waiting for them to come back. The rain hammered down, drowning out every other sound. By dawn, I felt hollow. My shirt was soaked with sweat. The cops finally came after I called in the morning, and they nodded, wrote it all down, told me I was lucky. A week later, I heard they'd been caught trying to rob another diner 3 towns over. Lucky. That's what they called it. But I didn't feel lucky. After that night, I stopped writing in my notebook during shifts. The pages stayed blank, pencil tucked away. Music felt pointless. What words could capture the sound of boots scraping across tile in the dark, the way your chest feels when you realize no one is coming to save you? I kept working, but something changed. Midnight wasn't just a time anymore. It was a weight. Every creak of the building, every shadow outside the windows, I felt like the world itself was pressing in, reminding me how fragile I really was. Customers came and went, most never knowing what had happened. I poured coffee, flipped burgers, smiled when I had to. But some nights, when the rain started tapping on the roof, I caught myself gripping the counter, remembering that grin in the doorway, remembering his words. "Nobody hears you scream at midnight." And he was right. Sometimes the harshest truths don't come from tragedy but from survival. Isolation strips away the illusion of safety and reminds us how small we really are. But survival teaches its own lesson. Vigilance matters, instincts matter, and even in the loneliest places, our choices, whether to freeze, to fight, or to endure, decide whether we make it to dawn. I never thought my life would drift so far from the sea. When I was a girl, I spent hours sketching whales in my notebooks, circling facts in worn marine biology books I found at the library. By the time I hit college, I knew I wanted to live my life in salt water, studying the silent giants that glided through the depths. For a while, that's exactly what I did. I was a field researcher, logging data, diving with equipment strapped to my back, hearing my breath echo inside my mask while whole schools of fish shimmered around me like a living constellation. But the ocean doesn't always love you back. One dive off the coast of Belize changed everything. A regulator failure, a sudden panic, and then darkness. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed with ringing in my ears that never went away. Doctors told me I was lucky. I would recover, but my left ear would never be the same. The damage made underwater work dangerous. My career ended in one terrifying moment, leaving me to build something new on land. I took a job at the Mariners Wharf Maritime Museum in Portland Harbor, Maine. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me close to the ocean. The museum smelled of brine and varnish, a place where echoes carried like ship bells across old wood floors. I worked as curator, cataloging everything from model schooners to glass cases of antique sextants. The crown jewel of our collection, though, was something I never quite made peace with: the sailors' remains exhibit. It had been assembled from shipwreck donations, relics, and replicas. Wax figures of drowned sailors, reconstructed skeletons arranged with care, artifacts found clutched in hands that had once been living men. Some visitors loved the drama of it, the eerie stillness. Others called it morbid. For me, it stirred a mixture of fascination and unease. They looked too real sometimes, like faces caught between breath and death. My life at the museum was quieter, steadier. But on November 3rd, 2014, just past midnight, I learned how fragile even a quiet life could feel. That evening I'd been fighting with my younger brother Adam. We were supposed to decide what to do with Mom's old house. He wanted to sell. I wanted to keep it, or at least take our time. "You can't just cling to everything forever, Evie," he said over the phone. "She's gone. Keeping her house won't bring her back. And tearing it down won't make you any less empty," I shot back. We hung up angry, voices sharp like broken glass. Restless, I sat up with tea in hand, trying to lose myself in a paperback. That's when my phone buzzed. A call from the security company. Motion sensors had gone off in the East Wing. At first, I thought storm winds had rattled something loose, the way they had before. But the guard on the line didn't sound casual. "Ms. Hart, the sensors aren't malfunctioning," he said. "We've got movement, multiple activations at once. The whole exhibit is lighting up." My stomach tightened. I grabbed my coat, flashlight, and keys, then drove through fog-thickened harbor streets. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot, the museum loomed dark and hushed against the water, lamplight glinting faintly off the waves. I told myself it was nothing, just a glitch. But deep down, I already knew this night was going to stick with me. The museum after hours was a different animal. In the day, kids pressed their noses to glass. Couples strolled through holding hands, and tour guides cracked corny jokes about sea monsters. At night, though, the place breathed differently. The air smelled more like mildew, and the sound of my footsteps carried too far, bouncing off beams and glass cases. I swiped in at the staff entrance and checked the security monitor first thing. The footage showed the sailor's remains exhibit, empty and still, but the motion logs lit up like fireworks, every figure triggered in the last 10 minutes. I gripped the desk edge, leaning closer to the screen. Wax sailors stared blankly at the camera, mouths slightly open, eyes glinting like wet glass. None of them had shifted, at least not on film. Still, the numbers didn't lie. The system was trained to catch even the smallest movements. I muttered to myself, faulty wiring maybe, but my voice sounded brittle. With my flashlight on, I headed into the East Wing. The museum creaked under my steps, old wood settling, the faint groan of pipes running along the walls. As I approached the exhibit doors, I felt a draft lick across my ankles. I paused, listening. Nothing but the hum of distant heaters. Inside, the figures stood in their positions. One slumped against a barrel, another sprawled face down on a fake deck. Two posed together in the moment of sinking. The wax sculptor had gone to brutal lengths, skin pale and puffy, lips tinged blue, eyes half-lidded as though frozen in their last terrified glance. I walked slowly down the row, sweeping the flashlight across faces. My light caught on a figure holding a rusted hammer, and for a second I thought its arm was extended farther than usual. I shook my head. My mind was primed to see things. The draft came again, stronger this time. A rope barrier swayed gently back and forth, though the air around me was still. "All right," I whispered. "That's enough." I turned to leave, but then I heard it, the faint creak of a boot against wood. My chest tightened. I whipped my light toward the sound. Every figure was still, but something had changed. The sailor with the hammer. His hand was no longer drooped at his side. It was stretched outward, fingers curled like he was reaching. My throat dried. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the rope. Then the alarm shrieked. Red lights strobed through the room, glaring off the glass. The sound rattled my teeth. All around me the figures were bathed in pulsing red, their positions somehow just a little wrong. Heads turned more toward me, shoulders angled like they'd shifted mid-step. I bolted, slamming the door shut behind me. My keys slipped from my shaking hands as I tried to lock them. When I finally got outside, the harbor air felt like ice in my lungs. By the time I reached my car, the only thought I had left was, I will never set foot in that room alone again. The next morning, the museum looked normal again. The alarms had reset, the wax sailors stood just as they always had, and the staff shrugged at me when I asked if anything unusual showed up on the cameras. The security guard on duty swore he'd seen the sensors spike, but nothing else. You've been working too many hours, Evelyn. My coworker Karen told me over coffee. Those figures are creepy enough in the daytime. At midnight? Forget it. Anyone would spook themselves. I wanted to believe her. I tried. But I couldn't shake the memory of that hand stretching toward me. Adam called that afternoon, trying to smooth things over from our fight. I'm not trying to erase her, Evie, he said. I just don't want you drowning in the past. Mom wouldn't want that. I softened. I know. I can't let go yet. Not after everything else I've lost. He was quiet a moment. Maybe the museum's getting under your skin. You sound haunted. The words sat heavy. That week, I avoided the East Wing unless I was with others. Still, small things began to nag at me. A janitor swore a rope barrier was down when he came in for morning shift, though I'd locked the doors. A volunteer said she thought one figure's eyes seemed different, like they'd been painted darker overnight. I told myself it was paranoia feeding paranoia. But one evening, as I was closing, I heard a faint humming. Low, broken, almost like a sea shanty, coming from the exhibit. The doors were shut tight, no one inside. I froze, listening. The melody was warped, halting, but the words were clear enough to chill me. Lowlands, lowlands, away, my John. My flashlight trembled in my hand. That was when I realized I couldn't keep ignoring it. I decided to confront it. Logic or no logic, I had to see what was happening. I arranged with the guard to stay overnight, claiming I needed to recheck the exhibit displays. He agreed, a little too easily, almost relieved he wouldn't be alone. By midnight, the museum was silent again. I sat in the office with the monitor glowing in front of me, heart thumping. At 12:14, the motion logs lit up. My mouth went dry. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down the hall, each step echoing. I pushed open the exhibit doors and stepped inside. The figures stood in their ghastly poses. But this time, I didn't blink when I saw one angled wrong. I walked closer, eyes sharp. Its head had turned an inch toward the door. All right, I said aloud, voice shaking. If you want to be seen, here I am. The air felt heavier, thicker. My ears rang louder, like my damaged hearing had caught a sudden pressure shift. Then I heard it. A whisper. Dozens of whispers, low and layered like water rushing over rocks. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they weren't mine. I backed away, but my foot caught a loose board. I stumbled, and the flashlight beam swung wildly across the room. For one split second, every figure was facing me. I bolted, running down the hall, heart battering my ribs. I didn't stop until I was outside in the freezing harbor air. I stayed away from the museum for 2 days after that. When I returned, I kept to paperwork, leaving the East Wing locked. But the whispers followed me. I heard them in quiet moments behind the walls and the hum of the vents. Finally, I told Adam everything. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he said softly, "Maybe they just want someone to listen. You, of all people, know what it feels like to be stuck between two worlds." His words hit me. I thought of my own accident, how I'd been trapped underwater, powerless, breathless. I thought of my mother's house, how I clung to it, unable to let go. And I thought of the sailors, preserved forever in their moment of drowning. The next time I entered the exhibit, I didn't carry my flashlight like a weapon. I stood quietly among them and said aloud, "I see you." The air shifted, lighter somehow. The whispers faded, and for the first time in weeks, the figures felt like just figures. I still never go into that wing alone. But I don't run from it anymore. Some things you can't explain. Some things you don't need to. I learned that fear grows strongest in silence when we refuse to face it. The past, whether it's grief, trauma, or the weight of memory, will follow us until we acknowledge it. Sometimes the only way forward is not to fight or deny what haunts us, but to recognize it, respect it, and then choose how to carry it. In seeing the shadows clearly, we take away their power. I grew up in Detroit, on a block where ambition was often treated like a temporary phase, something that got beaten down by reality sooner or later. But I was stubborn. Ever since I was a kid sneaking my dad's old camcorder out of the closet, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I'd drag my friends out into the alley or down to the riverfront, pointing at empty warehouses and telling them, "This is where the chase scene goes." They'd laugh, but they'd play along. By my early 20s, I'd saved enough to buy a halfway decent DSLR. I made short films, taught myself editing on a beat-up laptop, and even won second place at a small local festival. For a little while, I thought the path was opening for me. But then Mom had her first heart surgery and life turned sharp, medical bills stacked like bricks. My brother Marcus and I took shifts working wherever we could. He stuck to a construction crew by day. I picked up whatever night work I could, stocking shelves, washing dishes, but mostly food delivery. It wasn't steady, but it let me keep odd hours and still shoot when I could scrape together a cast and crew. By 2018, that dream was barely clinging on. Most nights I drove across Detroit with my phone propped on the dash, delivering tacos, burgers, and late-night pizzas to drunk college kids or factory workers clocking out at ungodly hours. The money wasn't great, but it was cash, and cash kept Mom's prescriptions filled. On December 12th, a Wednesday night, the air was brittle with cold, the kind that makes your breath feel like smoke. I was sitting in my car outside a 24-hour Taco Bell near the highway, waiting for an order to finish. The neon lights buzzed above, and the smell of stale fryer oil seeped into my jacket. That's when Marcus called. "You're never home, Caleb. Mom keeps asking for you." His voice carried that mixture of frustration and worry that had become our default. I rubbed my forehead. "I'm doing this for her. You think I like driving around at midnight with greasy bags of tacos? I'm out here so she doesn't have to stress about bills." "Yeah, but she doesn't care about bills as much as she cares about her son." His words stung because I knew he was right. Before I could answer, the worker slid the food across the counter. I grabbed it, muttered a goodbye into the phone, and checked the delivery app. The address blinked on the screen. Griswold Industrial Complex, 415 Dock Street. My first thought was, that can't be right. Griswold had been shuttered since the late 90s. It was one of those sprawling brick factories with busted windows that kids dared each other to break into. But the app confirmed it. Instructions: use back entrance. Gray metal door. Against my better judgment, I drove. The streets grew emptier the farther I went. Streetlights gave way to long patches of darkness, my headlights cutting across cracked asphalt and chain-link fences. When I finally turned onto Dock Street, the building rose in front of me like a giant carcass. The old Kavanaugh Printing Company sign still clung to the brick, its letters faded and peeling. Windows gaped like broken teeth. I pulled up near the loading dock, killed the engine, and sat there a moment. My gut twisted, but the app was clear. The order was real. I reminded myself people squatted in places like this all the time. Maybe some night workers used the old offices. I grabbed the food bag, climbed out, and crunched across gravel. The back entrance was there, just as described. Gray metal door, streaked with rust. I knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again. Silence. Then, with a metallic click, the door eased open about 3 inches. "Delivery for Sam?" I called, my voice echoing down the narrow hall inside. No answer. I should have left right then, but the cold bit through my jacket, and I hated the thought of marking an order undelivered. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hallway smelled of damp paper and rust. Dim bulbs flickered overhead, strung along exposed wires. Old posters clung to the walls. Support local workers, 1987. Their slogans had faded into smudged gray. I set the bag on a crate and called again. Sam? The door slammed shut behind me with a metallic clang. I spun, heart leaping. The handle rattled uselessly. Locked. My chest tightened. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching over broken glass deeper inside. I swallowed hard and darted into the nearest office, my sneakers slipping on dust. The room was empty except for overturned desks and a calendar still pinned to the wall. July 1996. I crouched behind a filing cabinet, forcing myself to breathe quietly. The footsteps grew louder, then rushed past the open doorway. Heavy, too heavy for one person. I pressed my back against the wall and waited. Minutes stretched like hours. I finally worked up the nerve to peek out. The hall was empty, but I didn't feel alone. The air carried a charge like the static before lightning. I crept into the corridor, scanning for another exit. My flashlight app lit the walls, catching graffiti scrawled over old union posters. Most of the messages were just tags, but one phrase repeated again and again in black spray paint. Still here. The footsteps started again. This time, closer, faster. My pulse spiked. I bolted down the hall, turning corner after corner. My shoes sent up clouds of dust, and somewhere behind me I swear I heard another set echoing mine. I passed an open room lined with rusted printing presses, hulking machines with rollers and gears frozen in place. The smell of ink still clung to the air, faint but sharp, as if the presses had stopped just yesterday. My flashlight caught shapes between the machines, shadows that shifted when I tried to focus on them. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The sound died instantly. No footsteps, no movement, just silence so deep it roared in my ears. Then faintly, a whisper. "Caleb." I froze. My phone screen dimmed, the battery dipping low. The whisper came again from the far end of the room. "Caleb, don't leave." My stomach turned to ice. Whoever or whatever was in here knew my name. I stumbled back into the hall, heart pounding. That's when I saw the faint glow of an exit sign flickering down another corridor. My body moved before my brain caught up. I sprinted for it. The sign led me to a stairwell. I pushed through the door, the rusted hinges screaming. The stairs spiraled downward into pitch darkness. I didn't think. I just ran. Footsteps clanging against metal. The air grew colder, damp seeping through my jacket. At the bottom, I found another hall. This one was different, cleaner somehow, as if it hadn't aged. Fresh posters lined the walls, bright and new. I stopped dead. My phone flashlight lit a calendar. December 2018. My skin prickled. Then the lights buzzed on overhead. Bright fluorescence, humming as if the place was fully powered. Machines thudded to life in nearby rooms, their gears turning, paper rolling. Voices echoed, dozens of voices, laughing, talking, arguing. It sounded like the factory alive again, workers on the night shift. I stumbled into a large press room. Men and women in coveralls moved around me, but their faces were blurred, smudged like water-damaged photos. None of them looked directly at me, but I felt their presence heavy as stone. I backed away, clutching the wall. My breathing turned ragged. Then the voices stopped. The machines stilled. Every head turned toward me at once, their blurred faces eerily unified. One voice rose above the silence, deep and hollow. "Still here." The lights cut out. Total black. My phone died in my hand. I ran blindly, hands scraping the wall, until I hit another door. I shoved it open and stumbled outside into the night air, gasping like I'd surfaced from underwater. Cold slapped my face, grounding me. I staggered toward the street, lungs burning, and collapsed against my car. For a long minute, I couldn't move. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the keys. By the time the police arrived, 20 minutes later, after I called from the safety of my locked car, the building was silent, boarded, powerless. The officer shined his flashlight into the cracked windows and shook his head. "Son, this place has been closed for decades. No power, no tenants. You sure you weren't trespassing? I didn't argue. I just nodded, too drained to explain. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. The door had been unlocked for me. The lights had burned. The voices had called my name. For weeks I couldn't sleep without the sound of presses grinding in my ears. I avoided Dock Street entirely. I told Marcus I'd stick to daytime jobs, no more graveyard shifts. He didn't press me on why. He just looked relieved. Months later, when I finally worked up the nerve to log back into the delivery app, the first request that popped up made my blood run cold. The address, 415 Dock Street. I deleted the app. Even now, I can't drive past the old factory without feeling eyes on me, and sometimes late at night when the city's quiet, I swear I still hear the presses running. I learned that not every door is meant to be opened just because it unlocks for you. Ambition, desperation, or pride can push us into places we don't belong, literal or otherwise. The past has echoes, and some places carry them heavier than others. If something feels wrong deep in your gut, trust it. Survival often comes down to knowing when to turn back, even if it means leaving unfinished business behind. I never pictured myself standing behind the counter of a roadside diner at 19, pouring stale coffee into chipped mugs for truckers who could barely keep their eyes open. I thought I'd be on a campus somewhere, living in dorms, going to parties, maybe doing late-night study sessions with people who cared about psychology as much as I did. That was my plan. Get my degree, specialize, and someday help families like mine. Families where mental illness had left its scars deep. My dad's bipolar disorder had been the shadow in our house growing up. He was either the life of the party, talking fast about 100 different projects he never finished, or he was locked in his room, blinds drawn, unreachable. My mom did everything she could, working doubles at a nursing home, trying to hold the roof over us, trying to keep me and my little sister fed. But treatment was expensive, therapy was inconsistent, and Dad never believed he needed help. That's why I wanted to become a psychologist. Maybe in some small way, I could be what my dad never had. But wanting something and affording it are two different things. Tuition wasn't forgiving. Even with loans, I had to chip in. So when the Bluebird Diner on Route 47 offered night shifts, I took them. It was an old place, neon sign buzzing like a fly zapper, booths patched with duct tape, and the jukebox in the corner permanently stuck on silence. Still, it paid minimum wage plus tips if I was lucky. Grace, the manager, was a tough woman with a raspy smoker's voice and more patience for grease fires than for customers. She warned me the first week. You'll see the same faces again and again at night. Some are fine, some you'll wish you never saw at all. She wasn't exaggerating. Nights at the Bluebird had their regulars, lonely truckers who ordered black coffee and stared out the window, college kids giggling too loudly after bar hopping, and the drifters, people who didn't quite belong anywhere else. But there was one who unsettled me more than all the others combined. Her name, whispered among the staff, was Midnight Marla. The first time I saw Marla was a Thursday around 1 a.m. The diner was empty except for one couple making out in a booth near the window. Marla walked in wearing a blouse and slacks that looked freshly pressed, like she was heading to an office job. But her hair was tangled, wild, and her eyes never settled on one place for long. She carried herself like someone who wanted to be invisible, but couldn't help drawing attention. She slid into a booth and ordered enough food for 3 people: waffles, bacon, eggs, and a slice of pie. I was writing her order down when she suddenly whipped her head toward the seat across from her, which was empty, and snapped, "No, Daryl, you don't get pancakes, you don't deserve them." I flinched. The couple in the corner glanced over and whispered, but Marla didn't notice. She kept arguing with thin air. Grace leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching. When Marla finished, Grace muttered to me, "Ignore it. Don't ask questions." So I didn't. Not that night. I just brought her food, left the plates, and tried not to look at the way she cut her waffles and placed half of them carefully on the opposite side of the booth. But curiosity doesn't sit quietly. Every psychology class I'd taken came rushing back to me. Hallucinations, delusions, dissociation. I wondered what her story was. What ghost was she feeding at that table? Weeks went by, and every time Marla came in, after midnight like clockwork, she argued with someone who wasn't there. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she laughed, sometimes she screamed. Nobody else bothered her. Regulars just shook their heads like she was part of the furniture. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. On October 17, 2006, I let my curiosity get the best of me. The night was slow. The jukebox lights flickered, the parking lot was empty, and Grace was in the back smoking. Marla walked in right on schedule, slid into her booth, and started her usual ritual of barking orders at the air. I brought her waffles and bacon. She pushed the bacon to the far side of the plate, muttering something under her breath. My hands were sweating when I finally asked softly, "Is Daryl eating with you tonight, or is it just you?" The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the whole diner tilted. Marla froze. Her fork clattered against the plate. Then she turned to me, slow and deliberate. Her eyes caught the fluorescent light gleaming like wet glass. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Instead, a scream ripped out of her, raw, piercing, so sharp it made the intercom speakers crackle and die. I stumbled backward, knocking a salt shaker onto the floor. My ears rang. Grace burst through the kitchen doors shouting, "Marla, stop it! Stop it!" But she didn't stop. The scream stretched on, jagged, inhuman, as if her lungs were endless. It was the kind of sound that didn't just hurt your ears, it crawled into your bones. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. She closed her mouth, her lips curling into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She stood, straightened her blouse, and walked out into the night without another word. The neon sign outside buzzed as she disappeared into the darkness. She never came back. For weeks, the booth sat empty. I kept half expecting her to push through the doors, to slam her hands on the table and shout at Daryl, but she didn't. Grace told me the story one night when the diner was dead quiet. She used to be a school teacher, she said, lighting another cigarette. Smart woman, good with kids. Then her husband, Daryl, drove off the bridge out on Mill Creek one night, drowned in the river. No one ever figured out if she was in the car or not. Some folks say she saw it happen, others. She shrugged. I asked, "So, she just lost it?" Grace exhaled a stream of smoke. "Wouldn't you?" I thought about Dad, about how close he'd come to losing himself to the highs and lows of his mind. I thought about Mom, still working doubles just to keep us afloat. I thought about Marla sitting in that booth feeding her husband's ghost. I couldn't stop hearing her scream. It haunted my dreams, stretching into something not entirely human. Life at the diner went on. Truckers still shuffled in, couples still fought in booths. Grace still smoked too much. But the memory of Marla clung to me. Sometimes driving home after a shift, I'd turn on the radio and catch a burst of static between stations. And in that static, faint but clear, I'd swear I heard her voice, arguing, whispering, always at midnight. It made me think about how thin the line is between holding on and letting go, between sanity and the places our grief can drag us. Marla wasn't just some crazy woman. She was someone broken by loss. Someone left behind at a diner on Route 47, still feeding a man who was never coming back. And I couldn't shake the feeling that by asking her that one question, I'd given her permission to scream out all the pain she'd been carrying. Maybe that was why she never returned. Maybe she'd finally said goodbye. Or maybe she was still out there haunting the midnight hours. I learned that every stranger carries a story, often heavier than we can imagine. Curiosity can open doors, but once opened, we can't control what spills through. Compassion means listening, but it also means respecting the boundaries of pain we don't fully understand. Some ghosts are best left unprovoked, and sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let people keep their silence. When I graduated with a degree in sports science, I thought I knew where my life was headed. I imagined myself working in clinics, maybe traveling with a team, helping athletes get back on their feet after injuries. My whole education was focused on bodies in motion, not old books collecting dust. But reality has a way of laughing at your plans. The gym chain where I'd been working part-time as a trainer went bankrupt in 2015, right before I graduated. Suddenly, the safety net I thought I had disappeared. I scrambled, applying to anything remotely connected to health and fitness, but the market was tight, and I didn't have connections. Months dragged on, and the bills piled higher. I moved back into my parents' house, which wasn't much of a refuge. They were in their own spiral. My mom worried constantly, and my dad obsessed over his retirement account, which had taken a hit in the recession years before. Their arguments filled the house, sharp and endless. By late 2017, desperation pushed me to take a night shift job at Willow Creek Historical Library in Salem. It wasn't sports, but it was work. The pay was modest, and the hours were strange, midnight to 6 in the morning. But solitude appealed to me. At that point, I didn't want to deal with people. The library itself was something out of a Gothic painting, a Georgian mansion converted into a sprawling research library, with spiral staircases, marble floors, and oil paintings watching from every wall. It had an east wing full of maritime logs and ship ledgers, a west wing lined with personal letters from the 1800s, and a reading hall with vaulted ceilings so high your voice echoed even in whispers. On my first night, I remember being struck by how peaceful it was. The air smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, and the only sound was the hum of the heater working against the Massachusetts cold. I thought, maybe this isn't so bad. Catalog books, file manuscripts, keep the place tidy. Quiet work for quiet pay. But quiet has layers. It can soothe you, or it can suffocate you. I didn't understand that difference until I'd been there a few weeks. The first strange thing happened in the East Wing. I'd been reorganizing maritime logs, thick, leather-bound ledgers that smelled of salt and mildew, when I noticed a dark spot on the wall. At first I thought it was water damage, but it bubbled, like ink swirling in water, and shimmered faintly in the low light. I rubbed my eyes, told myself it was fatigue. When I looked again, it was gone. I laughed it off, convincing myself I was imagining things. But that night when I drove home, I couldn't shake the image. It wasn't like seeing a shadow in the corner of your eye. It had texture, a strange pulsing life to it. The second incident was worse. I was shelving in the West Wing where portraits and old paintings hung in ornate frames. One painting in particular caught my eye. 2 children standing in a sunlit garden, both holding baskets of flowers. It was harmless enough, but when I glanced back after stacking a pile of books, I froze. Their heads had turned toward me. Not just a trick of light, I swear their eyes were locked on mine. I blinked hard. When I opened my eyes again, their faces were melting, twisting into grotesque shapes of teeth and limbs. I stumbled backward into a trolley, sending books crashing across the marble floor. My hands shook as I picked them up. I whispered to myself, "It's just exhaustion, Fiona. That's all." But deep down I knew exhaustion couldn't warp paint into flesh. That night I called my parents. I needed to hear familiar voices, something to tether me. Mom picked up first, and I barely managed to get the words out. "Mom, I think I'm seeing things. At work, something's wrong with me." Before she could answer, Dad took the phone. His sigh was heavy, irritated. "Fiona, it's just exhaustion. You've always been dramatic when you're stressed. Stop letting this job ruin you." His dismissal hit me like a slap. I bit my lip, holding back the urge to shout. Instead, I said, "Fine, you're probably right," and hung up. But I didn't believe it. By the following week, the library itself seemed to change after midnight. Chairs shifted slightly when I wasn't looking. Ledgers I had closed sat open when I returned. The silence grew thicker, as if the building were holding its breath. I started carrying a small notebook, jotting down every odd thing I saw, trying to rationalize it like data in an experiment. October bled into November, and my notes became frantic. Midnight. East Wing vibrated underfoot. Felt like standing on a subway platform. West Wing. Whispers. Couldn't find source. I started drinking more coffee, thinking alertness would keep the shadows at bay. But it didn't. My hands trembled constantly, and the dark circles under my eyes deepened. My body felt like it was unraveling one thread at a time. The breaking point came in the early hours of November 28th. I was in the East Wing again, sorting ship manifests, when the floor shuddered beneath me. At first it was subtle, like a passing truck, but then the entire row of shelves vibrated violently, books rattling loose, dust raining from the ceiling. My legs went weak. I dropped to my knees, clutching the nearest shelf. The walls rippled like waves. That same black frothing stain spread across the plaster, multiplying, crawling upward like veins. The air pressed heavy, and I swore I heard voices layered on top of each other, chanting words I couldn't understand. I ran. My sneakers slapped against marble, breath coming ragged, heart pounding against my ribs. I didn't stop until I burst into the reading hall and collapsed onto a bench. That morning, I made an appointment with a doctor. I walked into his office, pale, shaking, clutching my notebook like proof. He listened, scribbled notes, and finally said, "This sounds like stress-induced hallucinations. Sleep deprivation, isolation, and anxiety can create very vivid distortions. Medication followed. Therapy, too." I was relieved of my duties at the library, at least for the night shifts. I didn't fight it. I was terrified of what another midnight would bring. Recovery was slow. The pills helped, though they made me sluggish. Therapy gave me tools like building a new muscle one rep at a time. Mom was supportive, softer than she'd been in years. Dad stayed skeptical, but even he stopped arguing when he saw how shaken I was. Months later, I returned to the library, but only for daytime shifts. Sunlight poured through tall windows, making the marble floors glow instead of glisten. The paintings looked like paintings again, not melting faces. Books stayed where I left them. Silence felt like peace instead of pressure. But every time I pass the library at night, my body tenses. I hesitate at the front door, remembering the bubbling walls, the vibrating shelves, the whispers layered in the dark. I know I survived it, but survival doesn't erase memory. Midnight changed for me. It's no longer just a number on a clock. It's a threshold I will never fully trust again. I learned that solitude can heal, but it can also hollow you out if you're not careful. When we carry our stress and fears alone, the mind has a way of turning silence into monsters. Asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step back from the darkness before it consumes you. I never thought I'd see the inside of a mental health facility. At 32, I'd spent most of my life pretending everything was fine while the cracks under the surface grew wider, deeper. It started with little things: sleepless nights, racing thoughts I couldn't control, sudden bursts of anger over nothing. Then the nightmares came, clawing into my waking life, memories of my childhood friend's death haunting me like a shadow that never left. By the time I checked into the Riverside Mental Health Center, I was exhausted, broken, and numb. The first few weeks were a blur of medication adjustments, therapy sessions, and quiet observation. I watched other patients the way I imagine astronauts watch Earth from space, curious, fearful, and disconnected. After months, they finally discharged me, telling me I was stable enough to return to society. I didn't feel stable. I felt like I'd been thrown into a world that had moved on without me. My apartment had been rented to someone else. My family was distant and indifferent, and old arguments still hung between us like clouds I couldn't escape. The only option I had was Jordan, an old friend from high school, who was kind enough to offer me a couch in his cluttered one-bedroom apartment near the Riverside shelter. It wasn't glamorous, but it was shelter, and I needed that more than anything. I started walking the streets at night, trying to figure out a rhythm for my life again. That's how I found the night owls. a support group for recovering alcoholics that met nightly in the shelter's dim common room. At first, I sat in the back, listening quietly while others shared stories of relapse and redemption. Their voices were raw, honest, and broken in a way that mirrored my own inner state. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. It was during one of those meetings that Simon Hale showed up. I remember the exact moment he walked in. Tall, calm, charismatic. His eyes scanned the room like he was memorizing every face. There was a strange comfort in the way he carried himself, a presence that demanded trust without asking for it. Jordan was instantly drawn to him, and I watched in silence as my friend laughed openly for the first time in months. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things could start to feel normal again. But I should have known that hope is fragile. The night Simon appeared was unforgettable, though not for the reasons I hoped. We shared stories, small victories, and failures no one else would understand. Simon's voice was soothing, his laughter easy. I thought maybe we'd found someone who truly belonged in our fragile circle, someone who could anchor us when the world felt too heavy. Jordan smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years, and for a moment, I allowed myself to forget my own fear, my own lingering paranoia. By morning, everything had changed. I woke to a call from the police. Jordan had been found in his apartment, the scene grotesque and violent. A hatchet had been used, brutal, almost ritualistic. I could hardly believe it, refused to believe it. Jordan had been careful, always careful, and yet this had happened under his roof in a place he considered safe. Simon was gone, vanished like smoke in the wind, leaving nothing but a trail of chaos. When the police questioned me, I told them everything I remembered, everything I had seen, everything I had ignored. Simon's charm had been disarming. It had convinced me, even for a second, that he belonged, that he was trustworthy. But the security footage told a different story. It showed Simon leaving Jordan's apartment wearing his clothes, a display that made my stomach twist with a mix of horror and disbelief. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind spun endlessly, questioning my judgment, my perception, and my ability to protect the people I cared about. The Night Owls had disbanded after Jordan's death. I was left alone, clutching fragments of a life that no longer existed, haunted by the memory of a friend I couldn't save. Every time I passed the shelter, I imagined Simon lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to slip, to let my guard down. Even though he was caught and sentenced, the fear remained, like a pulse I couldn't control. The streets outside felt colder after that night. I would walk past them, hands shoved into my jacket pockets, imagining a figure emerging from the darkness. My mind played tricks on me constantly, every stranger a potential threat. Trust had become a foreign language, one I had forgotten entirely. Life slowly became a sequence of routines meant to keep me alive, not happy. I returned to the warehouse during the day and picked up shifts at the security firm at night. Exhaustion became my shield, numbing me to the world and to the constant fear that someone like Simon might appear again. I didn't talk much to anyone. The weight of guilt and trauma kept me contained. Some nights I would stand outside the shelter staring at its flickering lights. I would whisper apologies to Jordan's memory, silent confessions I hoped he could hear somehow. I should have seen it. I should have known. It became a ritual, a small attempt to make sense of chaos. The world had shown me that people can wear masks so convincingly that even the closest friend can be fooled. When I tried to return to normal life, I found it impossible. Every interaction felt measured, every smile suspicious. I had been forced to confront the fragility of human connections, the ease with which trust can be manipulated. I realized that survival isn't about physical strength alone. It's about recognizing danger, reading intentions, and keeping one's wits sharp even when the world seems safe. Months passed, and I began attending support groups again. The Night Owls had disbanded, but other groups existed, and I clung to them like a lifeline. I shared my story sparingly, careful not to reveal too much because in truth, I didn't fully trust myself to be believed. The trauma lingered, a weight I carried in my chest every time someone new joined the circle. One evening, a young man arrived at the meeting, nervous and jittery. I watched him carefully, noting the smallest cues, reading his eyes, his posture. Part of me wanted to warn him, to protect him from the dangers I knew existed. But another part of me realized that life didn't pause for fear. Trust, carefully placed and cautiously measured, was necessary if any of us hoped to heal. Even now, years later, the memory of that night haunts me. I walk with more caution. I trust less easily, but I also appreciate life differently. I learned that vulnerability is not weakness, but survival requires vigilance. The world is filled with people wearing masks, hiding motives, and sometimes even hiding a capacity for violence that defies comprehension. I continue to live, to rebuild, to engage with the world cautiously but deliberately. I speak in support meetings, hoping my experience can help someone else recognize danger, understand trauma, and navigate life with their eyes open. The memory of Jordan is always with me, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the cost of misjudgment. And though the fear lingers, I also carry the knowledge that I survived, that I endured, and that survival comes not from avoiding life, but from facing it with awareness and resilience. Life teaches us that trust must be earned, not freely given. Danger often hides behind familiar faces. I'd been counting down the days until summer break, craving one last thrill before senior year began. My parents had their usual lectures about responsibility and staying out of trouble, but for once, I didn't care. Nate, Jace, and I had been planning this trip for weeks, and nothing was going to ruin it. Shadow Pines was old, mostly forgotten, sitting on the outskirts of Portland with its peeling paint and crooked rides. Everyone in town whispered about the place, saying it wasn't safe after dark, but that was exactly why I wanted to go. We arrived just past midnight, the sky low and dark, clouds reflecting the dim glow of the park's flickering lights. The air smelled like burnt sugar and wet asphalt, mixing with the metallic tang of the old roller coaster tracks. Nate's backpack bounced against his shoulder as he walked next to me. "I told you this would be worth it," I said, grinning. "Midnight rides are the best. No lines, no screaming kids." Jace rolled his eyes. "Yeah, until we get stuck on some broken Ferris wheel or the coaster snaps in half." I laughed. "Relax, Jace. We've survived high school. We can survive a little amusement park at midnight." The phantom coaster loomed ahead, rusty tracks gleaming in the low light. The line was unusually long for this hour, but the emptiness of the park gave it a strange energy. That's when I noticed him, a tall figure standing near the back of the line wearing a mask that looked like a skull, completely out of place. I nudged Nate. Do you see that guy?" Nate squinted. "What guy?" I pointed, but the figure didn't move, didn't respond, just stared at us. There was something wrong about the way he swayed, arms loose at his sides, almost like he was listening to a rhythm only he could hear. We laughed nervously, convincing ourselves it was a prank or someone doing a dare. Still, the feeling of being watched crept under my skin. The ride itself went fine, the usual bumps and turns, but I couldn't shake the image of the masked man. His presence stuck with me like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Afterward, wandering toward the parking lot, my stomach sank when I saw him again, closer this time. His enormous frame cut through the darkness, mask glinting faintly in the sparse lights. He wasn't playing. This was deliberate. "Guys, and we should go, now," I whispered, voice tight with fear. We started jogging toward the lot, trying to ignore the pounding of our own hearts. Every step echoed across the empty grounds, bouncing off broken booths and abandoned attractions. I kept looking over my shoulder, and he was there, gliding silently, unnaturally fast despite his size. Panic bubbled in my chest. "Run, just run," Jace shouted, his voice cracking with terror. I scanned our surroundings. The carousel was dark, the old concession stand shuttered, and the gift shop boarded up. There was nowhere to hide, no one to call for help. I felt the adrenaline spike, that sharp, primal awareness that kicks in when fear takes over. Then I saw it. A slightly ajar door at the edge of the parking lot, the maintenance shed. "In there!" I yelled, and we slipped inside, hearts pounding, breath coming in shallow gasps. Shadows danced across the walls as the flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above. We pressed ourselves against the cold metal walls, straining to hear the slightest sound. Outside, the footsteps paused, then receded slowly. We didn't move for several minutes, terrified that any sudden motion would bring him back. I could barely speak. He's gone. Nate tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Yeah, gone for now. We waited until our shaking subsided, listening for anything more than the hum of the old fluorescent bulbs. When we finally stepped back outside, the parking lot was empty. The mask, the massive frame, all vanished. It was as if he had melted into the darkness, leaving only our terror behind. In the car, I gripped the wheel tightly. I swear he was real. Nate nodded, pale. Real enough to make me never come back here again? Jace didn't speak, staring out the window with wide eyes. None of us could make sense of it. Was it a prank? Someone on drugs? Or something darker? Something that didn't belong in this world but had chosen to haunt ours? The days afterward felt surreal. I replayed the events in my mind endlessly, going over every detail, every shadow, every heartbeat. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. Driving past shadow pines during the day, I felt the same unease, the lingering sense of being watched. I told a few friends, but most laughed it off, calling it teenage paranoia. I wanted to believe it was harmless, a trick of the night and the imagination. But the fear had rooted itself in me, stubborn, insistent. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mask, the figure swaying silently, the darkness closing in around us. I started taking different routes home, checking my surroundings constantly. The sense of being hunted lingered. I realized then how fragile our sense of safety really is, how quickly normalcy can be stripped away by a single, inexplicable threat. Months later, the park closed permanently. Maintenance crews claimed they'd seen strange figures wandering near the Phantom Coaster at night, always out of reach, always silent. I never returned, though the temptation sometimes burned inside me. I tried to rebuild my sense of normalcy, focusing on school and friends. But something had changed. Fear had become a part of me, a constant companion. I learned to respect it, to listen when my instincts screamed that something was wrong. It wasn't just the fear of the masked man. It was a realization that life can throw the unexpected at you, and your survival depends on awareness and courage. Even years later, driving past the abandoned park at night, I feel it. The subtle tug of presence, the sense that someone or something is still there lingering in the shadows. I can't explain it rationally, and maybe I don't want to. Some experiences leave questions instead of answers, fear instead of closure. Vigilance doesn't mean paranoia, and fear isn't weakness. Life sometimes places danger in the most ordinary places, and survival depends on noticing it, respecting it, and acting decisively. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but I survived. And that survival, messy, shaky, and frightening, taught me how fragile life is, and how important it is to trust your instincts. The world holds dangers hidden behind familiar faces and ordinary settings. Awareness, courage, and instinct are essential tools for survival. Life is fragile, and sometimes the safest choice is to trust your intuition, act decisively, and respect the subtle signals your mind and body give you. Danger doesn't always announce itself, it waits watching, and survival comes from recognizing it before it's too late.